Chapter 1354. This Yiguchin is all alone. Where did he get so many rare materials? That's right. It's really beyond our expectations. Seeing the luxurious smithing gift bag that Yiguchin took out, all the onlookers were shocked. Even the elders of the divine artifact sect coveted those divine materials. Young Master Yiguchin is becoming more and more unexpected. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes sparkled as she looked at Yiguchin. At first, everyone thought that Yiguchin was completely inferior to Nangong Juyun in terms of forging. But now, there was probably no one who would say such a thing. In their eyes, even if Yiguchin was still inferior to Nangong Juyun, he was still a forging genius. The materials can't decide everything. It's like giving rare ingredients to a lousy chef. He can only make food that is hard to swallow. Nangong Juyun commented indifferently. Yiguchin only smiled in response. At this point, there was no point in trying to argue. In the end, it was all about the results. Now that you have the materials, the next step is to use the flames to smelt the materials and start forging. This stage is a competition of the quality of the rare flame, the control of the flame, and the number of times you use the materials, Gu Beihan said. He wasn't the only one. Everyone present was well aware of this. Rare flames were too important to blacksmiths. The presence of a rare flame had a huge impact on the blacksmith's skill and the quality of the weapons they forged. However, the 10 blacksmiths who were able to reach this stage were all forging geniuses. It was impossible that they didn't have rare flames. Song Feichen directly brought out his own heaven and earth flame, volcanic rock flame. This flame existed in the depths of volcanoes. After being compressed for 1,000 years, it was extremely hot and was very suitable for forging. Perhaps it was because it was in a volcano, but Song Feichen's volcanic rock flame burned even more fiercely. Volcanic rock flame is a very good forging flame. Some people nodded slightly. Yang Qi was quite satisfied when he saw this. Song Feichen's performance didn't disappoint him. Then, Gu Xiangling also took out her own special flame, the sea blue water flame. This kind of flame was very strange. It existed at the bottom of the magma in the deep sea. Furthermore, this kind of flame had a gentle temperament and a uniform temperature. It was also very suitable for refining weapons. When the crowd saw that both of them had summoned their heavenly rare flames, they turned their attention back to Yiguchin and Nangong Juyun. Yiguchin did not hesitate. He raised his hand and the pitch-black heart demon flame rose. At this stage, these materials only needed to be calcined with the nirvana demonic heart flame. As expected, he only has the demonic heart flame. Although it's an upper-grade natural flame, I'm afraid it's no match for Nangong Juyun. Some elders of the artifact sect shook their heads. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing both smiled faintly. They were confident in what they were doing. I heard that you obtained the supreme grade heavenly flame at the Wanbao house. However, it seems that you have not refined it yet. Nangong Juyun could not help but smile. Why are you so talkative? Don't you know that you can't be distracted while forging? Yiguchin did not look sideways. He was focused on forging as he spoke indifferently. Ha, your glib tongue is better than your forging skills. Nangong Juyun smiled coldly. He did not say anything else and summoned his own flame. In his eyes, 2 types of flames, one gold and one silver, slowly lit up. As he raised his hand, the dazzling golden flame and the chilling silver flame surged out at the same time. Is that Nangong Juyun's heavenly rare flame? He summoned 2 types of heavenly rare flames at the same time. Moreover, their grades are extremely high. They seem to be supreme grade heavenly rare flames. Many of the people present had never seen Nangong Juyun summon his own flame. This was their first time seeing it. Could that golden flame be the true sun mystic flame? It's a supreme grade heavenly rare flame. And that chilling flame should be the moon frost flame. It's also a supreme grade heavenly rare flame. Many people around the heavenly cauldron took a deep breath when they saw Nangong Juyun summon the gold and silver flames. 2 supreme-grade rare fires of heaven and earth was one thing, but what was even rarer was that these 2 rare fires seemed to be corresponding flames. One was hard and one was soft. One was yin and one was yang. Many blacksmiths could not imagine how Nangong Ju Yun was able to refine 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames of completely different attributes into his body at the same time. As expected of the divine weapon prince. Putting everything else aside, just these 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames are enough to live up to his reputation, some people exclaimed. The true sun mystic flame and the moon frost flame were both powerful weapons, whether used for forging or fighting. Even Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with a dark light. Although they were enemies, Yi Guqin had to admit that Nangong Ju Yun was able to become one of the 10 great young masters. Moreover, he was a divine weapon prince who focused on forging. However, Yi Guqin was not afraid at all. After all, he still had a trump card that he had not revealed. All of the participating blacksmiths summoned their supreme-grade heavenly rare flames. Next, they began to forge. As everyone knew, the number of times one forged was related to the quality of the material. The more times they forged, the less impurities there would be in the materials and the higher the quality. Moreover, this kind of forging was not as simple as using a casting hammer. It also required the blacksmiths to merge their vital energy and mind. Therefore, this kind of forging consumed a lot of physical strength and soul power. Clang! 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 Sounds of hammering could be heard around the bronze tower as the 10 blacksmiths began to forge. However, the most eye-catching blacksmith was not Nangong Ju Yun, but Yi Guqin. This was because everyone realized that Yi Guqin's movements had not changed since the beginning. At this moment, Yi Guqin seemed to have turned into a robot. He did not feel any fatigue, soreness, or exhaustion. Look at Yi Guqin. His movements have not changed at all. There was news before that Yi Guqin's physical body was extremely strong. It seems that he has obtained a mysterious physical body inheritance. Many people knew that Yi Guqin's physical body was strong, but not many knew that Yi Guqin had inherited the inheritance of the ancient god clan. With such a physical body as a foundation, Yi Guqin was naturally at the top of the list in terms of number of times he had forged. Following closely behind was Nangong Ju Yun, followed by Song Feiqian and Gu Xiangling. Everyone could see that the final winner could only be one of these 4. Who will it be? Yi Guqin's physical body is unparalleled. The materials used are rare and the number of times he has forged is shocking. Nangong Ju Yun has 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames. His forging skills are also extraordinary. Song Feiqian is the eldest senior brother of the divine artifact sect. He is also the disciple of the first elder, Yang Qi. He is also not weak. Gu Xiangling is the daughter of the sect master, Gu Beihan. Although she is the only woman among the 4, she is not weak either. Everyone's curiosity was piqued. Who would be the final winner? Chapter 1355. Time passed bit by bit. The 10 participating blacksmiths were all doing their best in this final round, so their forging wouldn't end so quickly. Everyone wanted to push themselves to their limits so that the quality of their final weapon would be higher. Did I count wrongly? Yi Guqin broke through 1 million refinements. Many people looked at Yi Guqin as if they were looking at a monster. 1 million refinements was the limit of most blacksmiths. Not to mention the blacksmiths of the younger generation, there weren't many blacksmiths of the older generation who could reach 1 million refinements. What was even more shocking was that even though Yi Guqin had reached 1 million refinements, he didn't show any signs of exhaustion. There was only some sweat on his face. Moreover, it seemed like he was going to continue forging. Not long after, Nangong Ju Yun also broke through to 1 million refinements. However, his face was obviously pale and he was sweating profusely. Nangong Ju Yun's physical body couldn't compare to Yi Guqin's. 1 million refinements was almost his limit. As for Song Feiqian, he only had about 800,000 refinements. Gu Xiangling had more than 700,000 refinements. Could it be that Yi Guqin's vitality and energy never run out? Song Feiqian thought in disbelief. As time passed, Yiguchen's number of refinements also broke through to 2 million refinements. This was definitely a record that could shock the world of blacksmithing. Not to mention Nangong Zhu and the others, even Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were slightly stunned. They were unable to believe their eyes. The moment Yiguchen reached 2 million refinements, the heavenly tribulation blue gold, void mother gold, zenith heaven gold, and other sacred materials bloomed with unprecedented brilliance. Thousands of rays of divine light, thousands of auspicious colors, and all kinds of strange phenomena appeared. It was shocking. Could it be that he has already reached perfection? The first elder, Yang Qi, was tongue-tied when he saw this scene. 2 million refinements meant that almost all the impurities in the materials had been removed, leaving behind the purest part. This Yiguchen is too unexpected. The materials he forged have already reached perfection. It's hard to imagine what kind of divine weapon he will forge in the future. It would be a pity to use this perfect sacred material to forge a quasi-apocalypse weapon. However, don't even think about a heavenly tribulation weapon. Even if Yiguchen is a 6-star blacksmith, it's impossible for him to forge a heavenly tribulation weapon. Some of the blacksmiths present sighed. Perfect grade materials were too rare. They felt that it was a pity to use it to forge quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapons. This kind of material could be used to forge 10th tribulation or 100 tribulation weapons. It was even enough to forge 1,000 tribulation divine weapons and 10,000 tribulation divine weapons. Even Yiguchen himself did not expect that he would be able to forge the materials to the perfect level. Next up is the 9 orifices divine stone, Yiguchen murmured. The 9 orifice divine stone was extremely rare even among divine materials. Moreover, it was even harder to forge and smelt. Yiguchen controlled the nirvana demonic flame and began to calcine the 9 orifices divine stone. However, to Yiguchen's surprise, he found that the nirvana demonic flame could not melt the 9 orifices divine stone. This scene was also seen by the others. What's going on? The 9 orifices divine stone shows no signs of softening. Nonsense, the 9 orifices divine stone is considered top grade even among divine materials. Ordinary rare flames of the heavens and earth have no effect on it at all. Even an upper grade rare flame of the heavens and earth may not be able to melt it. I see. Could it be that only a supreme grade rare flame of the heavens and earth can do it? But doesn't Yiguchen only have the nirvana demonic flame? How is he going to forge it? He should ask Nangong Zhu. Perhaps Nangong Zhu will help him. Seeing Yiguchen's situation, there were a lot of discussions around. Because this kind of situation rarely happened in the past. Unless it was an extremely rare and tough material, ordinary rare flames of the heavens and earth could definitely melt it. If that's the case, won't Yiguchen be embarrassed? Some people said. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing sneered at the same time. They did not expect that Yiguchen would make such a fool of himself at the last stage. Of course, this did not mean that Yiguchen's nirvana demonic flame was of a low grade. It was that the 9 orifices divine stone's quality was too high. It was extremely tough, and even an upper grade rare flame of the heavens and earth was useless. Young Master Yi is in trouble now. Gu Xiangling was also forging, but she was still worried about Yiguchen in her heart. When Yiguchen forged a perfect material earlier, she thought that Yiguchen might be able to fight against Nangong Zhu. But now, Yiguchen was in trouble, and she was powerless to help. Song Feichen, on the other hand, had a gloating expression. When Nangong Zhu saw this, he could not help but chuckle. Yiguchen, looks like your rare flames of the heavens and earth can't melt the 9 orifice divine stone. Do you need my help? Nangong Zhu tone was mocking. His true yang mystic flame and moon frost flame were both rare flames of the heavens and earth. They were indeed capable of helping Yiguchen melt the 9 orifice divine stone. However, even a fool knew that Nangong Zhu was just trying to annoy Yiguchen. How could he help Yiguchen melt the 9 orifice divine stone? Heh! Yiguchen smiled faintly and did not panic at all. Why? Can't I? I'm not joking. But the condition is that I want half of the 9-orifice divine stone after it's melted. Nangong Juyun raised his eyebrows and said. Hearing this, the surrounding people were shocked. They did not expect Nangong Juyun to really want to help. Of course, half of the 9-orifice divine stone was a condition that no one could accept. Yi Guchen's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, "Can you shut up? It seems that my good intentions have been fed to the dogs." Nangong Juyun narrowed his eyes. Yi Guchen did not say anything and slowly raised his hand. What is he doing? Seeing Yi Guchen's action, everyone's eyes were filled with doubt. In the next moment, a pale white flame suddenly spread out from Yi Guchen's hand. The white flame surged like a raging tide and shook the space. It was as if the entire void was being cleansed like waves of water. When they saw the white flame, everyone around the heavenly cauldron, from the elders of the divine artifact sect to the spectators, was shocked and felt their scalps go numb. The sound of breathing could be heard everywhere. Shock. Unparalleled shock. Am I seeing things? That's the great Luo Void Incineration Flame. That's right. It's the flame that Yi Guchen obtained at the Million Treasures Pavilion. But it's only been a few days. How can he refine it? Everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned. Even Sect Master Gu Beihan was slightly dumbfounded. It took him a while to recover. Chapter 1356. It was no longer a secret that Yi Guchen had obtained the Daluo Void Incineration Flame from the Myriad Treasures House. Everyone in Heavenly Craftsmanship City knew about it. However, how many days had it been since the incident at the Myriad Treasures House? No one thought that Yi Guchen could refine a supreme-grade rare flame in these few days. Even some venerables had to be extremely careful when refining supreme-grade rare flames. If they were not careful, they might end up being burned by the flames. At this moment, everyone fell silent when they saw the white flame rising from Yi Guchen's palm. The flame reflected Nangong Juyun's face, which looked exceptionally stiff and ugly. He was still mocking Yi Guchen just now and negotiating terms with him as if he was giving alms. Now, Yi Guchen directly took out a supreme-grade rare flame of the same level and did not need his help at all. It was a slap in the face. Not only him, but Xiao Gongsheng and Nangong Huajing also looked gloomy. Yi Guchen seemed to be gradually breaking out of their expectations and control. How could he completely refine the Daluo Void Incineration Flame in a few days? Song Feichen's heart trembled, and he could not calm down. He saw Yi Guchen take out the Daluo Void Incineration Flame with his own eyes at the Myriad Treasures House. It was also because of this that he knew that it was only a few days apart. Gu Xiangling's chest also rose and fell slightly, and she sighed inwardly, "Young Master Yi is indeed extraordinary. He has exceeded everyone's expectations time and time again. Perhaps he really can." Everyone around the Heavenly Craftsmanship Furnace was uneasy. Nangong Huajing could not help but ask Duan Tianfeng, "Senior brother Duan, you already know that Yi Guchen has refined the Daluo Void Incineration Flame?" "Of course, he has the ability to do so." Duan Tianfeng's tone was slightly proud. This was the disciple he had chosen, and he was proud of him. "It's surprising, but it can't change the outcome." Xiao Gongsheng's expression was cold. He was still confident in Nangong Juyun. The reason was simple. Nangong Juyun had inherited Xiao Gongsheng's God-grade forging technique. This time, he would be making a big move. On the other side, Nangong Juyun took a deep breath and quickly adjusted his state of mind. After all, he was the pride of the Overlord clan and one of the 10 young masters. If he did not have this bit of mental fortitude, how could he stand on his own? It doesn't matter. So what if he has refined the Daluo Void Incineration Flame? I still have the advantage. Moreover, I will definitely win this time, Nangong Juyun murmured in his heart as a bright light flashed through his eyes. Next, Yi Guchen used the Origin Void Incineration Flame to burn the 9 orifices divine stone. The processing of materials was finally over. Next, it was time to fuse and smelt with casting techniques. This step was very important, and it was also the part that tested the blacksmith's ability the most. The importance of casting techniques to blacksmiths was equivalent to the importance of cultivation techniques to martial artists. A superior forging technique could greatly increase the success rate of forging a divine weapon, and it could also improve the quality of the divine weapon. In this segment, Nangong Ju Yun is probably better. After all, he has inherited Bei Yen Weapon Emperor's god-tier forging technique, many blacksmiths whispered to each other. It could be said that a god-tier forging technique was in existence that all blacksmiths dreamed of. It was a forging technique that could forge primordial famed swords. Even with Nangong Ju Yun's strength, he couldn't truly unleash the power of the god-tier forging technique. However, even if he could only unleash 1% of its power, it would be enough for him to crush everyone else. Nangong Ju Yun should be the winner of this segment, right? That's right. Who can defeat a god-tier forging technique? Even the divine artifact sect doesn't have a god-tier forging technique, many people discussed. Eunuch Shao had obtained the god-tier forging technique by accident, and it wasn't inherited from the divine artifact sect. Eunuch Shao hadn't given it to the divine artifact sect either. This was also the reason why Gu Beihan didn't like Eunuch Shao. As a member of the divine artifact sect, it was fine if he didn't give the god-tier forging technique to the sect after obtaining it. However, he had actually passed it to Nangong Ju Yun and even allowed him to compete for the position of Divine Artifact Sect's junior sect master. Eunuch Shao's actions were the reason why Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others were disappointed. Gu Xiangling, Song Feichen, and the others also stared at Nangong Ju Yun. Nangong Ju Yun's lips curled up into a faint smile. He glanced at the various materials in front of him and raised his hands at the same time. The True Yang Profound Flame and Extreme Yin Frost Flame also surged out. In an instant, the gold and silver flames surged into the sky. At the same time, countless runes floated within the flames. Everyone who saw this scene was deeply shocked. God-tier forging technique. Nangong Ju Yun is going to use a god-tier forging technique. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nangong Ju Yun. Especially the artificers. Their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Even Song Feichen and Gu Xiangling's eyes were solemn and filled with shock. Heaven and earth as the furnace, creation as the workmanship, yin and yang as the charcoal, and all things as the copper. Sun and moon refining origin. Nangong Ju Yun's tone was cold and solemn. The two flames on his palms burned like the sun and moon. This was the god-tier forging technique that Nangong Ju Yun had inherited from Eunuch Shao, sun and moon refining origin. This god-tier forging technique seemed to use heaven and earth as the furnace and the sun and moon as the fire. The scene when it was used was extremely shocking. What was even more shocking was that Nangong Ju Yun's True Yang Profound Flame and Extreme Yin Frost Flame were compatible with the attributes of the sun and moon refining origin. The True Yang Profound Flame was of the Yang attribute. The Extreme Yin Frost Flame was of the Yin attribute. Yi Guqin, I've even used a god-tier forging technique. What are you going to use to fight me? Nangong Ju Yun's attitude was condescending. With his strength, he could not use even 1% of the sun and moon refining origin's power. However, it was easy for him to use it to forge a divine weapon and become the champion. Hearing this, Yi Guqin said nothing. However, Gu Xiangling and Song Feichen's faces did not look too good. They had also used their own forging techniques. Although they were of high grades, they could not be compared to Nangong Ju Yun's god-tier forging technique. This was because a god-tier forging technique could be used to forge a primordial famed sword. Of course, even if Shao Gong used a god-tier forging technique, he would not be able to forge a primordial famed sword. This was because a primordial famed sword could only be forged by a god-tier forging master using a god-tier forging technique and using all sorts of sacred materials and rare treasures. Using the power of the fire spirit to forge a divine weapon. Nangong Ju Yun activated his flames again and resonated with the 10,000-year-old fire spirit within the bronze pagoda. Then, wisps of flames spread out from the bronze pagoda. These flames were like primal chaos and contained thousands of colors. Nangong Ju-yun is starting to use the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Seeing this, many elders of the divine artifact sect exclaimed. The flames of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit were of extremely high quality. They were even more powerful than supreme-grade rare flames. I, Song Feichen, will never admit defeat. Song Feichen roared. He was not willing to let his glory be overshadowed by Nangong Ju-yun and Yiguchen. He took out a piece of crimson crystal and poured his true qi into it to activate it. That's a fire spirit crystal. Is he crazy? He's using a fire spirit crystal to draw the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit? Seeing Song Feichen's actions, Yang Qi and the others' faces turned red as they cursed inwardly. The fire spirit crystal did have the ability to draw the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. However, if he was not careful, he would suffer a backlash. Wisps of primal chaos flames were also drawn to Song Feichen. As for Gu Xiangling, she did not go to extremes because she already knew that she had no chance of winning. Thus, at this moment, all of her attention was focused on Yiguchen. Not only Gu Xiangling, but Duan Tianfeng, Gu Beihan, Xiao Gong, and Nangong Huajing were also looking at him. At this moment, most of the people were looking at Yiguchen. Now, Nangong Ju-yun and Song Feichen had gone all out and used their trump cards. How would Yiguchen deal with this? Chapter 1357. Everyone present knew that this was the crucial moment of the junior sect master selection. Whether or not Yiguchen could forge a high-grade divine weapon would depend on whether or not he could surpass Nangong Ju-yun and Song Feichen in terms of forging. I think Yiguchen is in a tough spot. Nangong Ju-yun is using two types of supreme rare flames and the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. With the help of the god-tier forging technique, no one can compare to him. That's right. Even Song Feichen is throwing caution to the wind and taking out the fire spirit crystal. He's going all out. If Yiguchen doesn't have a decisive trump card, it's impossible for him to win against these two. Everyone present, whether they were from Divine Artifact sect or the spectators, was well aware of this. If Yiguchen didn't have a decisive trump card, it was almost impossible for him to surpass Nangong Ju-yun. It was also because of this that Yiguchen had attracted the attention of everyone. They all wanted to know what kind of trump card the disciple chosen by the Southern Cauldron Saint had. God-tier forging technique? Yiguchen sized up Nangong Ju-yun, but he didn't look surprised. Duan Tianfeng had already told him that Xiao Gongfu had imparted the god-tier forging technique to Nangong Ju-yun. It seems like I can only use that move. But before that, I have to think of a way to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Yiguchen muttered to himself. Only those who understood the forbidden forging technique knew how heaven-defying it was. But at the same time, it was also very difficult to succeed. It was even more difficult than the god-tier forging technique. Yiguchen pondered. If he wanted to forge a divine weapon with the forbidden forging technique, the success rate was very low. The only possibility was to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. The power of the 10,000-year fire spirit could not only assist Yiguchen in forging, but also improve the quality of the divine weapon. However, compared to Nangong Ju-yun and Song Feichen, Yiguchen had a major flaw. He had never stayed in Divine Artifact sect before, so he naturally didn't know how to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. This was Yiguchen's first time coming to this heavenly cauldron. He was not as familiar with it as Nangong Ju-yun and Song Feichen. The crowd also saw Yiguchen's predicament. I'm afraid Yiguchen is in trouble now. He doesn't know how to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Gu Beihan shook his head slightly. Sigh, it's all for naught. Yang Qi sighed in his heart. Previously, Yiguchen's performance had stunned many people. They believed that he would be Nangong Ju-yun's strongest opponent. As a result, they now knew that Yiguchen would not borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. This was an absolute disadvantage. So it's like this. Gu Xiangling bit her lip. Although she was also smithing, she knew very well that she could no longer compete for first place. Compared to Song Feiqian, Gu Xiangling felt that Yi Guqin could be compared to Nangong Zhu Yun. Just when everyone thought that Yi Guqin would be at a disadvantage, Yi Guqin did something that no one expected. He walked step by step toward the entrance of the bronze tower. What's going on? What is Yi Guqin doing? Don't tell me he's going to enter the bronze tower. Everyone was surprised to see Yi Guqin's actions. Whether it was the people of the Divine Artifact sect or the other spectators, they all knew that the bronze tower was where the 10,000-year fire spirit was sealed. Anyone who rashly entered would not have a good ending. Not to mention Yi Guqin, who was only at the divine dwelling stage, even a sovereign or a false saint would have a great risk of dying. Even a heavenly tribulation saint would lose a layer of skin even if they didn't die. This was because the chaos heavenly fire controlled by the 10,000-year fire spirit was too powerful. Some saints with weaker physical bodies could not withstand it. What is he doing? Is he committing suicide? Gu Beihan frowned. If Yi Guqin died in the Divine Artifact sect, the Divine Artifact sect would be in a lot of trouble. Sir Yi, please wait. It's too dangerous inside the bronze tower. Don't go in. Seeing this, Gu Xiangling hurriedly shouted with a nervous look on her face. She thought that Yi Guqin did not know how dangerous the 10,000-year fire spirit was. Yi Guqin turned around and smiled. He did not say anything and continued to walk in. On the other side, Shao Gongsheng and Nangong Huajing were also surprised. Shao Gongsheng turned to look at Duan Tianfeng and said in a playful tone, "Duan Tianfeng, could it be that your disciple has lost all hope and decided to commit suicide because he knows he can't win? Don't worry. Even if your disciple dies, my disciple will live well," Duan Tianfeng said coldly. Although he said that, Duan Tianfeng's heart was beating like a drum. After all, he was a member of the Divine Artifact sect and knew the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit better than anyone else. To be honest, Duan Tianfeng did not understand why Yi Guqin would take such a risk. However, in his eyes, Yi Guqin was never a reckless person. He naturally had his reasons for doing so. What is Yi Guqin trying to do? Is he really courting death? Nangong Zhuyun muttered to himself as he watched Yi Guqin walk into the cave. He vaguely felt that Yi Guqin must have his reasons for doing so. However, Nangong Zhuyun could not figure out what trump card Yi Guqin had that allowed him to safely face the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Meanwhile, Song Feiqian sneered in his heart, "Yi Guqin is even crazier than me. In order to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit, he is willing to risk his life." Most of the people present thought that Yi Guqin was crazy. Only Yi Guqin himself knew that his mind was extremely clear. Yi Guqin naturally would not do something that would lead to his own death. However, in Yi Guqin's view, taking a certain risk in order to obtain power and transform was worth it. Yi Guqin directly stepped into the giant bronze tower. In the outside world, the world was silent. He actually managed to enter. This Yi Guqin is really capable of doing some shocking things wherever he goes. Many people sighed with emotion. Wherever Yi Guqin was, there would be no lack of big things. "Father, why didn't you stop young Master Yi?" Gu Xiangling asked, her face pale. "Sigh, this is his own choice. Moreover, we can't interfere in the competition." Gu Beihan shook his head. How could this be? Gu Xiangling was slightly dazed. She did have a good impression of Yi Guqin. His character, experience and other aspects were far better than Nangong Zhuyun and Song Feiqian. However, let alone divine dwelling experts, even saints would not feel good inside the giant bronze tower. Therefore, the chances of Yi Guqin coming out alive were very slim. Everyone thought that Yi Guqin was most likely going to die this time. While such thoughts arose in the outside world, Yi Guqin himself had already entered the giant bronze tower. Chapter 1358. As soon as Yi Guqin stepped into the bronze pagoda, the first thing he felt was heat. It was extremely hot. It felt as if he had stepped into the fiery purgatory of the 18 levels of hell. The surroundings were densely packed with burning flames. Yiguchin immediately activated the demonic heart flame to protect himself. Only then did he manage to offset part of the heat. At this time, Yiguchin finally had the time to observe the situation in the pagoda. The entire pagoda looked bottomless, like an abyss. Yiguchin was now at the top of the bronze pagoda. Logically speaking, this should be the place where the flames were the weakest and thinnest. However, even here, Yiguchin had to activate the demonic heart flame to protect himself. One could imagine how powerful the 10,000-year fire spirit was. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Cultivating the 9 tribulations Heart Sutra and overcoming the 9 tribulations to become a god is a heaven-defying act. How can there be no danger? Yiguchin's eyes were shining. How could he not know the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit? Previously, Duan Tianfeng had warned him that if he could not, he should not force himself to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit because he might be injured or even killed if he was not careful. However, Yiguchin had already made his own decision. He cultivated the 9 tribulations Heart Sutra and had an unparalleled physical body. He also had 2 types of unique flames to protect himself. It was not impossible for him to try to overcome the tribulations with the 10,000-year fire spirit. Yiguchin naturally knew how dangerous it was to use the 10,000-year fire spirit to overcome the tribulations. However, if he did not try because of the danger, Yiguchin did not know how long it would take for him to completely overcome the 4 tribulations. Time waits for no man. When I reach Sky Burial Island, I will face Dihaotian. Before that, I will not miss any opportunity that can make me stronger. Yiguchin's eyes were cold. He felt a sense of urgency in his heart. Because at Sky Burial Island, he would have an ultimate battle with Dihaotian. Dihaotian was definitely a powerful opponent that could not be underestimated. If my guess is correct, the 10,000-year fire spirit should be at the bottom of the bronze tower. Yiguchin thought to himself as he began to move towards the bottom of the bronze tower. For every 1,000 feet it descended, the temperature of the surrounding space would rise by a level. In the end, Yiguchin had no choice but to refine the exalted void blaze as well. White and black flames intertwined, forming a flame shield around Yiguchin's body. Even so, the gradually rising temperature caused Yiguchin to frown. After a long descent, Yiguchin finally came to a stop. This was because they had already reached the bottom of the bronze tower. Looking over, Yiguchin's gaze suddenly froze. At the bottom of the bronze tower was an ancient giant formation. The entire formation extended to the inner walls of the bronze pagoda, becoming one with the pagoda. This was clearly a formation used to suppress and seal. And at the bottom of the bronze pagoda, endless chaotic flames roiled. The flame was extremely strange. It was a colorful chaotic color, as if it was the combination of thousands of strange flames. That's the chaotic divine flame, Yiguchin murmured. He had heard from the old drunkard that the flame controlled by the 10,000-year fire spirit was a chaotic divine flame born from the chaos beyond the heavens. This chaotic divine flame was of extremely high quality and extremely powerful. It had even surpassed the supreme grade rare flames of the universe and reached the level of divine flame. It was rumored that during the primordial age, some divine craftsmen who forged famed primordial swords used divine flames to forge them. Divine flames were of a higher level than supreme-grade rare flames of the universe. Even the sect master of the divine weapon sect, Gu Beihan, did not possess such a flame. Master Xiao and Duan Tianfeng did not possess it either. This was because divine flames were too rare and too rare. Even if one could encounter one, refining it was extremely difficult. It was several times more difficult than refining supreme-grade rare flames of the universe. Because of these conditions, divine flames rarely appeared in the world and were rarely controlled by anyone. Yiguchin did not expect to see a divine flame here. The chaotic divine flame is somewhat compatible with my chaotic sea of consciousness. Yiguchin pondered. His sea of consciousness also had the chaotic attribute. However, Yiguchin's attention was still on the chaotic divine flame. There was an existence similar to a qilin in it. It looked like a qilin beast, but it was not a real living creature. It was a fire spirit formed by the chaotic divine flame. Is that the 10,000-year fire spirit? Yiguchin murmured. Just as Yiguchin was paying attention to the 10,000-year fire spirit, the 10,000-year fire spirit also noticed Yiguchin. Although the 10,000-year fire spirit was not very intelligent, it would instinctively attack any living creature that approached it. This was because the chaotic divine flame was unwilling to be subdued by anyone. Therefore, the 10,000-year fire spirit would attack anyone that approached it. It was also because of this that no one dared to enter the bronze pagoda. This was because not many people could withstand the burning of the chaotic divine flame. Roar! The 10,000-year fire spirit was surrounded by colorful chaotic divine flame. It roared at Yiguchin and charged at him. The monstrous chaotic divine flame spread out and formed a huge fire tide. It almost filled the entire bronze pagoda and spewed out of the cave. At the same time, the crowd outside the bronze tower saw the surging primal chaos divine flame gushing out of the cave. What's going on? Why did the flame suddenly surge out? Could it be that the 10,000-year fire spirit is rebelling? The onlookers were shocked. No, I'm afraid that Yiguchin has provoked the 10,000-year fire spirit, Gu Beihan said in a deep voice. What? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Although Yiguchin had entered the bronze pagoda, it was not certain that he would be killed. As long as he did not provoke the 10,000-year fire spirit. But looking at the state of the flames, it was obvious that the 10,000-year fire spirit had been provoked. How can this be? Gu Xiangling bit her red lips. She originally had a glimmer of hope that Yiguchin would come out safely. But now, it seemed that the probability of Yiguchin being alive was almost zero, not to mention getting out of there safely. This was because everyone knew that it was almost impossible for a divine dwelling stage expert to resist the primal chaos divine fire. I thought that Yiguchin, who had swept across the sacred emperor world, would have some ability. It seems that I have overestimated him. Nangong Juyun sneered as he refined his divine weapon. After dealing with the most troublesome opponent, there was no longer any suspense about the result. It was almost impossible for Gu Xiangling to surpass him. As for Song Feichen, even though he had brought out the fire spirit crystal, Nangong Juyun did not care about him at all. The position of junior sect master has finally fallen into my hands. Nangong Juyun smiled happily. Chapter 1359. In the eyes of the crowd, Yiguchin, who had caused the fire spirit to go berserk, had no chance of surviving. I didn't expect that Yiguchin, who had stirred up a storm in the holy imperial world, would end up like this. Yes, I was looking forward to his performance on Sky Burial Island. I wanted to see the ultimate battle between Yiguchin and Di Haotian. Now, it seems that there is no hope. The crowd sighed and sighed. This time, even Duan Tianfeng's heart was pounding. Although he believed that Yiguchin had his own plans, he found it hard to imagine how Yiguchin would survive. Yiguchin, can you create another miracle? Duan Tianfeng muttered to himself. Just as everyone in the outside world thought that Yiguchin had died, a voice rang out. At the bottom of the bronze tower, Yiguchin was in a life-and-death struggle with the fire spirit. The fire spirit's only attack was the chaotic divine fire. Once the chaotic divine fire appeared, all other flames would submit. Even if Yiguchin used the demonic heart flame and the Daluo void incineration flame, it was useless. The scorching heat almost immediately charred Yiguchen's skin to an incomparably black color. The pain of being burned by the chaotic divine fire was not something that anyone could endure. Xianyuan heavy water. Yiguchin used the Xianyuan heavy water from his spiritual dwelling in his dantian to help him resist the power of the chaotic divine fire. However, it was better than nothing. Heart Sutra of 9 Tribulations. Yiguchin activated the Heart Sutra of 9 Tribulations and began to pass the tribulation. His dantian seemed to have turned into the origin of a black hole. The chaotic divine fire around him surged into it. In an instant, Yiguchin felt a burning pain as if he was being torn apart. Even with Yiguchin's composure, his face turned pale and his body trembled violently. His muscles and bones were charred at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ancient God's Heart. Yiguchin activated the sealed ancient god's heart. The blood of the ancient gods flowed out as if it was free. This was the heart of Tian Tong King from the ancient god tribe. The ancient god blood that flowed out of it contained a strong life force. However, even with the help of the ancient god's blood, Yiguchin's situation was still very critical. This was because the primal chaos divine flame was too powerful. Even the ancient god's blood could not replenish Yiguchin's physical vitality. Yiguchin took out a few more stalks of sacred medicine. With his current status in the Sword Dynasty, sacred herbs were not particularly rare to him. Yiguchin immediately took out 4 saint-level herbs and refined them into his body. In an instant, surging life essence spread out from his body, nourishing Yiguchin's burned meridians and internal organs. At the same time, Yiguchin also took out some ice attribute elixirs and pills to reduce the damage of the chaos divine flame. Although the effect was minimal, it was better than nothing. Under Yiguchen's various methods, although he was still suffering from the pain of purgatory, he was barely able to hang on to a thread of life. Of course, the main reason for this was that Yiguchin cultivated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra could transform the power of the chaos divine flame into tribulation power. Otherwise, without the help of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, Yiguchin would not have been able to survive the burning of the chaos divine flame no matter how strong his physical body was. After all, this was a flame that even honorables and false saints were afraid of. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit was also very surprised. It did not expect its chaos divine flame to be unable to kill this lowly human warrior in front of it. However, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit only knew how to use the chaos divine flame to attack. Therefore, it only continued to use the chaos divine flame to burn Yiguchin. Yiguchin's dantian also began to transform again in the chaos divine flame tribulation. At this moment in the outside world, while everyone was lamenting Yiguchin's death, their attention was also on the final battle. Gu Xiangling's divine weapon was almost complete. The elders of the Divine Artifact sect concluded that the divine weapon Gu Xiangling refined in the end would probably be at the level of a quasi-tribulation divine weapon. This was already a very good result. But now, none of the elders of the Divine Artifact sect could laugh. Because this result could not be compared to Nangong Ju Yun's. On the other side, Song Feichen was also doing his best. This won't do. If this continues, I will definitely not be able to beat Nangong Ju Yun. Song Feichen could feel the shocking fluctuations from Nangong Ju Yun. He gritted his teeth and poured his true qi into the fire spirit crystal again. In an instant, more chaos divine flame was drawn over. Not good. Brat, stop. First Elder Yang Qi's expression changed when he saw this. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit had already gone berserk. Song Feichen would definitely not be able to control the power of the fire spirit crystal now. As expected, a large mass of primal chaos divine fire surged towards Song Feichen. Song Feichen's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He hurriedly retreated. But even so, he was still affected and let out an ear-piercing scream. Ah! My hand, my hand! Song Feichen's entire body was charred black. He raised his hand, and the charred bones of his hands were exposed. Damn it! Yang Qi's expression darkened. He landed in front of Song Feichen in a flash and hurriedly took out a pill for Song Feichen to consume. But Song Feichen's hands were already burned to the bone. Even if they could be preserved, they would probably be crippled. You idiot! Can't you even maintain the most basic patience of a blacksmith? How could you do such a reckless thing? Yang Qi said resentfully. Song Feichen's face was pale and his heart was dead. From the moment Yang Qi interfered, he had already lost the right to compete for first place. Taking a step back, even without this reason, Song Feichen's hands would definitely not be able to complete the next forging. Song Feichen could be said to have tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. He had even ruined his future forging prospects. How could this be? It's all because of that Yiguchin. If it wasn't for him causing the fire spirit to go berserk, I wouldn't have fallen to this state. Song Feichen's expression was grim as he blamed Yiguchen. It's a pity that I didn't see Yiguchen's death with my own eyes. Song Feichen thought viciously. With Song Feichen losing the right to participate, the outcome of the young sect master selection was almost obvious. Yiguchen entering the Bronze Tower was equivalent to dying. Song Feichen's hands were crippled and he lost the right to participate. Gu Xiangling's weapon was obviously incomparable to Nangong Ju Yun's. It was obvious who the final winner would be. Ha, as expected. Xiao Gongsheng revealed a faint smile. Nangong Huajing also smiled. After all, Nangong Juyun was a prodigy of the Nangong family. If he became the young sect master and took control of the divine artifact sect in the future, it would be extremely beneficial for the Nangong family. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a voice suddenly rang out. Yiguchen, who was inside the Bronze Tower, began to transform. Chapter 1360. At the bottom of the giant Bronze Tower, Yiguchen was sitting cross-legged in the center of the endless primal chaos divine fire. His body was charred black, and not a single piece of intact flesh could be found. He was like an old monk in meditation, or an ancient Buddha undergoing nirvana. There wasn't the slightest movement. In fact, even his breathing and heartbeat were so weak that they were close to non-existent. If someone was present, they would even mistakenly think that Yiguchen's body was a charred black statue. And in this state of death, Yiguchen's dantian began to undergo earth-shaking changes. Inside his dantian and god dwellings, a miniature world seemed to be evolving. At the bottom of the divine dwelling, there was earth chi flowing, condensing into hard earth. The river formed by the mysterious origin heavy water flowed in the divine dwelling, and was burned by the primal chaos divine fire. It turned into mist and rushed to the top of the divine dwelling, as if turning into clouds and the firmament. And the primal chaos divine fire urged the flow of air, as if igniting the vitality of the entire divine dwelling. In some ancient records, the world was composed of the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. The four elements formed the entire world. And at this moment, just as the world began to evolve in Yiguchen's divine dwelling, the order of the entire divine dwelling suddenly became chaotic, and the structure began to become unstable. The reason was very simple. This was because Yiguchen's divine dwelling still lacked the wind element. Without one element, the entire world would be incomplete, and it would begin to collapse. Rumble. In the end, the world in Yiguchen's divine dwelling didn't completely take shape, and only a prototype was formed. And it was also the moment the prototype world was formed that Yiguchen erupted with an extremely powerful aura. His cultivation level began to loosen, and he smoothly broke through to the seventh layer of the divine dwelling. Because he had only formed the prototype world of the divine dwelling, and hadn't transformed into a true world-level divine dwelling, Yiguchen's cultivation base had only broken through a small realm. However, it was conceivable that Yiguchen's cultivation would soar when Yiguchen truly condensed a world-class divine dwelling. After the transformation of the embryonic divine dwelling world was completed, Yiguchen's body finally began to move. He slowly stood up. A cracking sound came from the charred surface of his body. A layer of charred dead skin cracked and fell off, revealing his fair skin. Finally, the charred surface of Yiguchen's body peeled off completely, revealing his perfect figure. His figure was tall and slender, and his body was well proportioned. He did not have any explosive muscles, but the power that was faintly hidden within him was something that could not be ignored. This time, the benefits of Yiguchen's tribulation were not limited to merely forming the embryonic form of a divine dwelling world. At the same time, the primal chaos divine flame tempered Yiguchen's body. His physical body seemed to be showing signs of transforming into a 3-star ancient god. Of course, it was obviously not that simple to truly transform into a 3-star ancient god. Now, I finally understand why the world god's abode is called the legendary god's abode, Yiguchen whispered. This was because, to a certain extent, the world divine dwelling was somewhat similar to the sacred emperor realm of the thousand-leaf saint emperor. But it should be said that Yiguchen was a divine dwelling stage expert. And the thousand-leaf Saint Emperor was an immortal Saint Emperor. The gap between these two stages could not be described as a chasm. It was simply impossible to compare them together. But the world divine dwelling allowed Yiguchin, at the divine dwelling stage, to faintly form the embryonic form of the sacred emperor realm. Wasn't this cheating? If I condense the world divine dwelling and use it to suppress the enemy, wouldn't it be equivalent to the thousand-leaf Saint Emperor using the sacred emperor realm? Yiguchin exhaled deeply. He finally understood the heaven-defying aspect of the world divine dwelling. This was equivalent to allowing Yiguchin to comprehend the world laws of the immortal Saint Emperor level at the divine dwelling stage. Wasn't this heaven-defying? The Nine Tribulations Heart Sutra is indeed worthy of being called a supreme cultivation technique. Yiguchin slowly suppressed the shock in his heart. It could be said that Yiguchin was only one step away from transforming into a world divine dwelling. But Yiguchin's harvest this time was far more than that. His eyes, with a hint of a smile, looked at the 10,000-year-old fire spirit that was frozen in the void not far away. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was a human, then its expression at this moment must be one of bewilderment. This lowly and insignificant human martial art practitioner in front of it had actually survived its chaos divine flame. Not only that, but the chaos divine fire also seemed to have no effect on him. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to be in disbelief. It opened its mouth and roared, spitting out another pillar of fire. However, the pillar of fire did not cause the slightest harm to Yiguchin when it fell on his body. Not even a strand of his hair was burnt. Yiguchin's lips curved in a faint smile. Amidst the astonishment of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, he slowly lifted his hand. Puff! A wisp of multicolored divine flame that looked like primal chaos appeared between his fingers. Roar! Just as the wisp of chaos divine fire appeared, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit roared violently, as though it was venting the shock and disbelief in its heart. In its opinion, other than itself, it was impossible for anyone to control the chaos divine fire. However, the human in front of it controlled it. With the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's low intelligence, it could not understand the situation at all. Yiguchin wore a faint smile on his face. The divine dwellings in his body had been refined by the chaos divine fire. Naturally, they would not be harmed by the chaos divine fire. Even like the Xianyuan heavy water, Yiguchin could control the chaos divine fire. Moreover, as the power of the chaos divine fire was too overbearing, the nirvana demonic flame and Daluo void incineration flame in Yiguchin's body were swallowed by the chaos divine fire. As long as it was related to flames, it would be refined by the chaos divine fire. Therefore, Yiguchin only had one type of flame in his body, and that was the chaos divine fire. However, the chaos divine fire was many times stronger than the Daluo void incineration flame and nirvana demonic flame combined. There was no comparison between the two. At this moment, Yiguchin stared thoughtfully at the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit trembled all over. Apart from the chaos divine fire, it had no other means to fight against its enemy. In other words, it was no threat to Yiguchin at all. However, it was possible for Yiguchin to refine it. At the thought of this, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had a feeling of trembling. Heh! I have an idea, but I don't know if the sect master of the divine artifact sect and the others will come after me after I do this. Yiguchin chuckled softly. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was gone, Gu Beihan would probably want to kill him. Unfortunately, according to Yiguchin's plan, he would need the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's power to forge the sword with the forbidden art. Yiguchin's chaos divine fire alone would not be enough. Everyone in the outside world probably thinks that I've died. It's time to go out. Yiguchin thought to himself as he changed into a black robe. His figure was slender and his eyes were calm. He stepped into the void and walked out of the bronze pagoda. Chapter 1361. Outside the bronze tower. The current situation seemed to have been settled. Gu Beihan's eyes were filled with worry and helplessness. First Elder Yang Qi's face was dark and he didn't say a word. Song Feichen's face was ashen and his eyes were filled with resentment. In his opinion, Yi Guqin wanted to teach him a lesson even if he was dead. Because of him, his hands were crippled and he lost the chance to compete for the championship. Father, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Gu Xiangling walked to Gu Beihan's side after the competition ended. Her beautiful face was filled with worry. She had used all her strength to forge a quasi-tribulation weapon. For someone her age, it was already extremely outstanding. Unfortunately, there was still Nangong Ju Yun, who was even more monstrous. He had dual supreme-grade rare flames and a god-grade forging technique. Nangong Ju Yun was undoubtedly a top-tier forging genius. Whether it was in the past or now, the outcome hasn't changed. Xiao Gongshu smiled slightly, completely relaxing his mind. In the beginning, he didn't take Yi Guqin seriously. However, when Yi Guqin displayed surprising abilities, Xiao Gongshen couldn't help but take him seriously. But now, the outcome was set. His disciple, Nangong Ju Yun, would become the junior sect master of the Divine Artifact sect. Duan Tianfeng didn't say a word. It was just that his already aged face appeared even more tired. There was also a hint of self-blame in his eyes. What he cared about the most now was Yi Guqin's life and death, not the result of the competition. For Duan Tianfeng, as long as Yi Guqin could survive, he didn't care if he lost the competition or the bet. When Nangong Huajing saw Duan Tianfeng's expression, a trace of pity flashed across her eyes. She no longer had any feelings for Duan Tianfeng. But they did have a beautiful past. Senior brother Duan, Huajing said before that we should let bygones be bygones. Isn't it good to let go of your obsession and live in seclusion? If that was the case, things wouldn't have turned out this way and Yi Guqin wouldn't have died. Nangong Huajing thought that she was comforting Duan Tianfeng. However, when he heard the words Yi Guqin, Duan Tianfeng retorted as if he was provoked, "That's impossible. Yi Guqin has his own plans. He didn't even die when the three overlord forces tried to kill him on the Tianhuang plains. How could he die here?" Duan Tianfeng refused to believe it. Sigh, senior brother Duan, you're still as stubborn as ever, refusing to accept the truth. Nangong Huajing shook her head slightly. However, just as she finished speaking, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. "Oh, the truth. What kind of facts?" Hearing this, Nangong Huajing was slightly stunned. However, when Gu Xiangling heard this voice, her beautiful eyes could not help but widen. Her clear eyes were filled with unexpected joy. Many people present were also stunned. Their gazes simultaneously turned towards the source of the sound. It was inside the cave of the giant bronze tower. "This can't be, can it?" An elder's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he gasped. They could not believe it, but that voice did indeed come from inside the cave. Thousands of eyes fell on the entrance of the cave at the same time. Under everyone's shocked and incredulous gazes, a young man in a black robe stepped out calmly. His black hair fluttered in the wind, his eyes were calm, and his handsome face was very calm. Who else could it be but Yi Guqin? Yi Guqin! Everyone was in an uproar. It was as if a pot had exploded. Everyone stared at Yi Guqin as if they had seen a ghost. Didn't they say that even supremacies and pseudo-saints would be killed inside? What was going on now? Compared to the shock of the onlookers, the elders of the Divine Artifact sect, Yang Qi, and Gu Beihan were also a bit stunned. They often came to the heavenly cauldron to forge, so they were very clear about the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. That was the Chaos Divine Fire. It was more powerful than a supreme-grade rare flame. Even Gu Beihan did not pay attention to the Chaos Divine Fire. Because he knew that it was impossible. A 10,000-year-old fire spirit was not something that ordinary people could subdue. That was why Gu Beihan and the others were so shocked. The Chaos Divine Fire's rampage also indirectly meant that Yi Guqin had indeed encountered a 10,000-year-old fire spirit. They could not imagine how Yi Guqin had survived. What is going on? Why is he still alive? Why? Song Feichen's face froze, and then he felt as if his head was about to explode. His hands were crippled by the chaos divine fire and he was disqualified from the competition. But now, Yi Guqin walked out of the bronze tower as if nothing had happened. Who the fuck could stand this? Song Feichen felt like he was going crazy. He was affected by the chaos divine fire and became so miserable, but Yi Guqin was safe and sound. Song Feichen was not the only one who was shocked. Nangong Zhuyun's mind was also shaken, and his hands almost became unsteady. How is this possible? The veins on Nangong Zhuyun's temples throbbed. This Yi Guqin was too lucky. Meanwhile, Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling, and the divine eagle Blackie all breathed a long sigh of relief. Especially Duan Tianfeng, whose self-blame and dejection were swept away. Although he did not know how Yi Guqin could come out alive, this was naturally the best outcome. Yi Guqin looked at Nangong Huajing indifferently and said, "I'm sorry to disappoint you that I didn't die in the bronze tower." Humph. Xiao Gongsheng flicked his sleeves and did not say a word with a cold face. He was also in disbelief and had many questions in his heart. But he obviously could not bring himself to ask Yi Guqin. Nangong Huajing was speechless by Yi Guqin's question. Her beautiful face alternated between green and white, and she was very embarrassed. Just now, she said that she wanted Duan Tianfeng to admit the fact that Yi Guqin had died. In the end, Yi Guqin immediately came out of the bronze tower. That was a slap in the face. But soon, Nangong Huajing adjusted and said, "Yi Guqin, you're indeed very unexpected. I'm afraid no one expected you to come out alive. But so what? The result of the junior sect master selection has been decided. There's no suspense." Many people nodded in agreement with Nangong Huajing's words. Indeed, Nangong Zhuyun was almost firmly in the position of junior sect master now. Even if Yi Guqin came out alive, what was the use? He could not win if he wanted to. Duan Tianfeng also shook his head and sighed. "That's enough, little Yi. It's good that you're safe. At most, we won't compete in this competition. If we lose the bet, so be it. Perhaps it's time to accept our fate." If Yi Guqin met with an accident because of him, Duan Tianfeng could not escape the blame. Therefore, Duan Tianfeng was willing to give up the bet. "Ha! Senior Duan Tianfeng, this doesn't seem like your style." Yi Guqin suddenly smiled. Everyone was stunned when they saw Yi Guqin's smile. That was because his smile was full of confidence. "I, Yi Guqin, will not accept my fate. Even if it's a taboo that defies the heavens, I will still forge a peerless weapon," Yi Guqin said firmly. He raised his hand and his black hair danced wildly. A blood-red aura was emitted from Yi Guqin's body, causing the heavens and earth to shake and the sky to change colors. It's the taboo forging technique. Duan Tianfeng's heart trembled violently. Was Yi Guqin going to use the taboo forging technique that even he had never used before? Chapter 1362. The word taboo was the most prominent feature of a taboo art. A taboo art was comparable to a god-tier art, and to a certain extent, it was even slightly more dangerous than a god-tier art. However, it was far more dangerous than a god-tier art. If a god-tier art failed, the worst that could happen was that the weapon would be scrapped. However, if a taboo art failed, it would usually cause a lot of harm to the artificer. A light injury could result in injury, while a heavy injury could result in death. It was precisely because taboo arts were extremely rare and had severe side effects that they were almost extinct among artificers. Generally speaking, only a madman would think of using a taboo art to forge a weapon. At this moment, everyone present was frozen in place when they sensed Yi Guqin's aura. This was especially true for those from Divine Artifact sect. Their eyes were wide open and filled with shock. What kind of art is Yi Guqin trying to use? This aura is definitely not an ordinary art. It's not even a god-tier art. Yang Qi's heart trembled violently as he couldn't help but exclaim. Could it be a taboo art? Gu Beihen's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he spoke. What? A taboo art? Some of the elders of Divine Artifact sect gasped, their eyes filled with shock. A taboo art? What is a taboo art? Some of the spectators were puzzled. A taboo art is an extremely dangerous art. A light injury could result in the artificer's injury, while a heavy injury could result in death. However, a taboo art like this is usually comparable to a god-tier art, an elder of Divine Artifact sect explained. What? It's that dangerous? Is Yiguchin trying to put his life on the line? Some of the spectators turned pale with fright after hearing the explanation. They didn't expect that a mere forging competition would put one's life in danger. Gu Xiangling's face paled slightly. She naturally knew how dangerous a taboo art was. Moreover, given the aura Yiguchin was emitting, this taboo art was clearly the best, but also the most dangerous. Young Master Yi, you don't have to do this, Gu Xiangling said with a pale face. Was it worth it to put his life on the line for the position of junior sect master? Duan Tianfeng's emotions were also swaying. When he first met Yiguchin and passed on his forbidden forging technique, he had indeed wanted Yiguchin to use this forging technique to help him win the bet he had lost to Elder Shao. However, after such a long time, Duan Tianfeng and Yiguchin had already developed a master-disciple relationship. Now, he would rather lose the bet than let Yiguchin take the risk. Little Yi, you don't have to do this. Duan Tianfeng sighed. Yiguchin's expression did not change as he said, Senior, this Yi is not doing this for you. I am also determined to forge a divine weapon that belongs to me. Yiguchin had been planning to forge his own divine weapon for a long time. It was just that he didn't have the conditions and opportunity to do so. How could Yiguchin miss out on such a good opportunity? As for the danger of the taboo forging technique, if Yiguchin was afraid of danger, he would not have entered the giant bronze pagoda at all. Duan Tianfeng opened his mouth slightly when he saw the determination in Yiguchin's eyes, but in the end, he did not say anything. This was Yiguchin's determination. You actually passed on the taboo forging technique to him. This is indeed unexpected. Elder Zhao's expression was unprecedentedly cold. He had thought that Nangong Zhuyun would definitely win the position of junior sect master. However, Yiguchin walked out of the giant bronze pagoda alive, which exceeded Elder Zhao's expectations. Now, he had even used the taboo forging technique. Even Xiao Gonggang felt a faint sense of unease in his heart. Yiguchin was the one who had been plotting for such a long time. Would there be any problems because of him? Nangong Huajing's heart was also not calm. Both of them felt a trace of uneasiness in their hearts. So what if it's the taboo forging technique? Yiguchin, with your strength, can you unleash the power of the taboo forging technique? Don't die before the divine weapon is forged. Nangong Zhuyun sneered. If everyone could succeed in using the taboo forging technique, it would not be called a taboo forging technique. Furthermore, Yiguchin was not a blacksmith. Forging was just his side job. In Nangong Zhuyun's opinion, the success rate of using the taboo forging technique was much lower than using the divine grade forging technique. Only an ignorant person would recklessly guess the abilities of others. If you can't do it, then shut up. Yiguchin's tone was cold as he ignored Nangong Zhuyun. You. Fine, I want to see if your taboo forging technique or my divine grade forging technique is stronger. Nangong Zhuyun threw caution to the wind. This time, he had to succeed in forging the divine weapon. Sun and Moon refining primary pole. Nangong Zhuyun activated the true Yang mystic flame and the extreme Yin frost flame with both hands. All sorts of sacred materials and supreme grade treasures floated within the flames. Vaguely, it seemed as if two divine swords were about to be formed. Many people's gazes fell on Yiguchin. Although Yiguchin is going to use the taboo forging technique, the grade of his flames is slightly lower than Nangong Zhuyun's. Yeah, although the origin void incineration flame is comparable to Nangong Zhuyun's two flames, the silent destruction demonic flame is still slightly weaker. Just as everyone was discussing, Yiguchin slowly raised his hand. Boom! A loud explosion was heard as a colorful, chaotic flame burst out from the ground. As soon as the flames appeared, even the void seemed to be slightly distorted by the heat. This flame is. When they saw Yi Guqin take out the chaos divine flame, the entire place fell silent. The eyes of some blacksmiths from the divine weapons sect almost popped out of their sockets. Pinch me. Is what I'm seeing real? The chaos divine flame. Yi Guqin took out the chaos divine flame of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Screams and cries of surprise rose in all directions. Everyone was dumbfounded, their eyes wide open. Even the spectators and outsiders had seen Nangong Ju-yun, Song Feichen, and the others struggling to borrow the chaos divine flame. But now, Yi Guqin casually took out the chaos divine flame. This, not to mention the onlookers, even Gu Beihan's expression became interesting. He even wanted to grab Yi Guqin and ask him how he had obtained the chaos divine flame. As for Song Feichen, it was as if he had lost his soul. His eyes were dull, and he couldn't believe his eyes. His hands had been burned by the chaos divine flame. Yi Guqin had taken control of the chaos divine flame. This made Song Feichen's heart completely turn to ash. He couldn't compare to Yi Guqin. Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling, and the others were also in disbelief, but they were happy for Yi Guqin. The chaos divine flame was definitely a rare weapon for blacksmiths. It was far better than a supreme rare flame. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were petrified. They stood rooted to the ground, their expressions unprecedentedly stiff. Of course, their shock couldn't compare to Nangong Ju-yun's. Because he was Yi Guqin's opponent. Yi Guqin taking out the chaos divine flame was like a bolt from the blue for Nangong Ju-yun. Because, when the chaos divine flame appeared, all flames would submit. Chapter 1363. Nangong Ju-yun could clearly feel it when Yi Guqin took out the chaos divine fire. His true sun mystic fire and sun frosty flame seemed to be suppressed and started to tremble. If the supreme grade rare fire was the noblest among flames, the chaos divine fire was the king of flames. Once the chaos divine fire appeared, all flames would submit to it. Chaos divine fire, how did you manage to control the chaos divine fire? Nangong Ju-yun stared at Yi Guqin and gritted his teeth. Yi Guqin had refreshed his understanding of Nangong Ju-yun. Again and again, he displayed astonishing feats. At this moment, Nangong Ju-yun finally understood why Yi Guqin was so famous. Yi Guqin was not to be underestimated. It seems like I have underestimated you. Nangong Ju-yun gritted his teeth and felt uneasy. He had always been extremely talented and had a high status. He was the chosen one in everyone's eyes. However, Yi Guqin's appearance seemed to have woken him up. Ju-yun, calm down. The forbidden forging skill is not that easy to succeed. You still have the highest chance of winning. Xiao Gongshu shouted when he saw that Nangong Ju-yun's emotions were unstable. That's right, Ju-yun. You still have a chance of winning. Nangong Huajing encouraged him. Nangong Ju-yun's body shook when he heard what the two of them said. He suddenly woke up. That's right. Even if Yi Guqin has the chaos divine fire, the success rate of him executing the forbidden forging skill is very low. However, I have a 60 to 70% chance of succeeding. Nangong Ju-yun's eyes were bright. After all, he was one of the 10 great young masters. He quickly adjusted his state of mind. Yi Guqin, don't even think about shaking my determination to win. Nangong Ju-yun took a deep breath and stopped being affected. He started to focus on forging his weapon. Yi Guqin smiled and shook his head when he heard that. Some people would not cry until they saw the coffin. At the thought of this, Yi Guqin did not hesitate any longer. He took out all sorts of forging treasured materials and began the final forging. Human soul forging sword, sword and life dual cultivation. That was the name of the forbidden forging skill. One could only forge one weapon in one's lifetime using this forging skill. When the weapon was completed, Yi Guqin would not be able to use this forbidden forging skill to forge other weapons. It was as though they were a couple for the rest of their lives. However, the target weapon. Of course, if Yi Guqin obtained other forbidden forging skills in the future, he could still use it. However, this taboo forging technique could only be used to forge this weapon. Next was the forging skill. Forging was the higher grade divine weapon was forging weapons was forging Yun's weapon. However, none of them were Su Yun's Yun. They to Yu Yun Yun Yun. This was because the young master of divine artifact sect would be chosen between the two of them. Yi Guqin, can you impress me? Gu Beihan murmured in his heart. He Chen Chen's Yi Chen Lu's Chen Gu to him, but he was he God hearing him God Ling Yi Chen. Gu Beihan did not give a clear answer. It was too troublesome for Yi Guqin to become Yu Su Su's Yu Su Su. However, if Yi Guqin's performance could make him look at him in a different light, then why not? Those overlords would not be so stupid as to destroy divine weapon sect, would they? In the end, Gu Beihan did not want to cause any more trouble. Now, Gu Beihan was quietly watching the final battle between the two. Yi Guqin began to focus on forging the rough divine weapon. The 9-orifice divine stone that he had fused with the weapon could allow it to cultivate like a human. The mica spirit containing saliva could give the weapon spirituality. The zenith heaven metal could give the weapon natural Taoist rhymes. The tribulation blue gold could give the weapon the ability to resist tribulation lightning. The void mother gold could make the weapon lighter and could even pierce through the void in the future. In short, Yi Guqin had made full use of every divine weapon. On the other hand, Nangong Ju Yun was not to be outdone. He had 2 sword prototypes floating in the flames. Vaguely, 2 completely opposite sword chis burst out. On the other hand, Yi Guqin was also forging a sword. TSK, these two are really at odds with each other. They're both forging swords. Some people exclaimed when they saw this. When the time came, the swords they forged would be a competition. Time passed. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 7 days, Yi Guqin had been forging the sword prototypes. As for his forbidden forging technique, it was not complete yet. On the other hand, Nangong Ju Yun's weapon was about to take shape. Finally, at a certain moment, 2 violent roars rang out from the sea of flames. What's going on? It's Nangong Ju Yun. His weapon is complete. He actually succeeded. That's a god-tier forging technique. There was an uproar as everyone's eyes widened. Even Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others turned their gazes over. The weapon is complete. Nangong Ju Yun was excited. He raised his hands and 2 swords burst out from the sea of flames. One of the swords was like a red jade. Flames flowed around it as if it was reflecting the light of the sun. As for the other sword, it looked like it was carved out of ice crystals. It gave off a bone-chilling aura. As soon as the 2 divine weapons appeared, all the attention in the world was taken away by them. Yin-yang dual swords, complete. Nangong Ju Yun looked up to the sky and roared. In an instant, dark clouds rolled in the sky and thunder surged. Could that be? It can't be. After being baptized by the heavenly tribulation, young Master Nangong actually forged a heavenly tribulation weapon. A cry filled with disbelief rang out. The entire place was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked. No one had expected Nangong Ju Yun to be able to forge a heavenly tribulation weapon. This was simply heaven-defying. It was terrifying. Rumble. Lightning flashed between the dark clouds. Then, silver lightning poured down. Nangong Ju Yun's yin-yang dual swords trembled under the baptism of the heavenly tribulation. You must make it through. Nangong Huajing could not help but clench her fists. Xiao Gongsheng's breathing quickened. After all, they had planned this for a long time. Success or failure depended on this. If Nangong Ju Yun successfully passed the heavenly tribulation weapon, it would mean that he had successfully forged a heavenly tribulation weapon. If he failed to pass the heavenly tribulation weapon would be destroyed. Gu Beihan, Gu Xiangling, Yang Qi, and the others had some hope that the heavenly tribulation weapon would not be able to pass. In such a tense and torturous situation. Finally, the dark clouds began to disperse. The heavenly tribulation also dissipated. The yin-yang dual swords had successfully passed the heavenly tribulation. They had become a heavenly tribulation weapon. Whoosh! An uproar sounded in all directions. That's great. Even with Duke Xiao's shrewdness, he couldn't help but smile. Did it succeed? Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were dazed. This meant that she would be forced to marry Nangong Zhuyun in the future. Ha ha ha, that's great. The heavenly tribulation weapon has been forged. Yi Guqin, what are you going to use to fight me? Nangong Zhuyun looked up to the sky and laughed. Yi Guqin's expression did not change. A heavenly tribulation weapon? It's not bad, but the weapon that I, Yi Guqin, forge will belong to me. It will be a unique and unparalleled weapon. Yi Guqin's eyes sparkled. Chapter 1364. The yin-yang twin swords that Nangong Zhuyun had forged floated in the air, radiating with sword qi as if they were announcing his success. Yi Guqin, what's the point of continuing to forge now? After forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon, Nangong Zhuyun was completely relaxed. His expression was calm as if he could see the dawn of victory. Do you think you can rest easy after forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon? Yi Guqin sneered. What do you mean? Nangong Zhuyun frowned slightly. Did Yi Guqin think that he could forge a heavenly tribulation divine weapon that was more powerful than the yin-yang dual swords? Nangong Zhuyun was not the only one who was confused. The other spectators were also confused. They did not even know if Yi Guqin's heavenly tribulation divine weapon would succeed, let alone be compared to Nangong Zhuyun's yin-yang dual swords. Everyone around the heavenly cauldron was in a heated discussion. However, these noises did not affect Yi Guqin. At that moment, he was fully focused on forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Rumble. At a certain moment, the sword embryo began to form. As soon as it was formed, a terrifying sword qi gushed out, causing the air to emit a clanging sound. It's really something. Gu Beihan raised his eyebrows when he saw that. From the sword embryo, he could feel a chill that would make one's heart tremble. It was only the sword embryo, but it already had such power. How powerful would it be when it was fully formed? No. Impossible. Nangong Zhuyun's eyes narrowed. He would not believe that Yi Guqin could forge a heavenly tribulation divine weapon that was better than his until he saw Yi Guqin's heavenly tribulation divine weapon. The sword embryo is finally formed. Next is, Yi Guqin's eyes lit up. In the next moment, he did something that no one expected. Sword embryo, out. Yi Guqin immediately took out the innate sword embryo in his dantian. The sword embryo that was entwined with chaotic energy broke through the air. It was the size of a palm and was sparkling like jade. It flickered with a chaotic sharpness, as if it could cut through the void. That's Yi Guqin's innate mystique, the innate sword embryo. Why did he summon his own sword embryo? Many people cried out in alarm, unable to understand. Could it be that he wants to? Gu Beihan seemed to have thought of something as his expression froze. If that was really the case, then Yi Guqin was plotting something big. What he wanted to forge was not just an ordinary divine weapon, but a weapon that he could perfectly control and whose attributes were completely compatible with him. If one had to describe it, the divine weapons forged by ordinary blacksmiths were the common version. On the other hand, the divine weapon that Yi Guqin forged was a custom-made version that was exclusive to him. The custom version was obviously more difficult to forge than the general version. Go! Yi Guqin used his fingers as a sword. Following his guidance, the innate sword embryo merged into the sword embryo. What? What is Yi Guqin trying to do? Why did he merge his innate sword embryo into the rough sword embryo? Those onlookers who did not know what was going on all cried out in alarm. Innate mystique could be said to be the core skill of a prodigy. They did not expect Yiguchen to merge his innate sword embryo into his divine weapon. This. Could it be that he wants to? Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing's expressions froze at almost the same time. With their experience in forging, they naturally knew what Yiguchen was trying to do. Impossible. Even I would find it extremely difficult to forge such a divine weapon, let alone Yiguchen. Moreover, it's impossible for him to perfectly merge his innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo, Xiao Gongshu said coldly. His words immediately caused the surrounding people to react. I see. Yiguchen's scheme is so big. Can he really forge it? Didn't you hear Master Xiao Gongshu say that it's difficult to merge an innate sword embryo and a rough sword embryo? I'm afraid Yiguchen is going to make a fool of himself. The uproar in the surroundings was like a tidal wave rising. It was really because Yiguchen's actions were too shocking. No one had expected him to do this. Forge a divine weapon that belongs to oneself. Yiguchen, are you kidding? Even some 8-star forging grandmasters have a pitifully low success rate. Nangong Ju-yun's face was cold when he found out. He did not think that Yiguchen had the ability to forge such a divine weapon. Yiguchen did not say a word. He ignored the clamor outside and began to merge his innate sword embryo into the rough sword embryo. At the moment of merging, the innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo produced a strong repulsive force. The innate sword embryo was Yiguchen's innate mystique. As for the sword's rough embryo, it was made of various sacred materials. Both of them were extremely powerful. When they merged, there would definitely be a repulsive force. Neither of them would submit to the other. Ha, as expected. Xiao Gongshu's lips curled up into a cold smile. With his experience, he naturally knew that Yiguchen's success rate was close to 0. Sigh, Yiguchen is still too impulsive. Gu Beihan saw this and shook his head slightly. Even Gu Beihan himself could not guarantee that he would succeed in forging a divine weapon. Yiguchen. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were fixed on Yiguchen. If Yiguchen could really succeed today, he would have created another miracle. Clang, 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 in the void, sword chi intertwined. The innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo resisted each other and could not merge. Yiguchen's expression remained calm. In fact, he had already expected this to happen. Just when everyone thought that Yiguchen's efforts would be in vain, Yiguchen suddenly raised his hand and the chaos divine flame surged out. Seeing this, Nangong Ju-yun's lips curled up into a cold smile. Using the chaos divine flame. Unfortunately, with your strength, even if you use the chaos divine flame, you will not succeed. Nangong Ju-yun was not the only one who thought this. Xiao Gongshu, Nangong Huajing, and the elders of the divine artifact sect all thought the same. The chaos divine flame was indeed powerful, but Yiguchen's current strength was not enough to fully unleash its power. However, Yiguchen's lips curled into a smile. His hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes seemed to be burning with multicolored chaos divine flames. 10,000-year-old fire spirit, come out. Yiguchen let out a long howl that seemed to shake the stars in the sky. At the same time, Yiguchen activated the embryonic form of his world divine dwelling. It also contained the power of the chaos divine flame. It could be said that Yiguchen was the only person who was qualified to completely refine and control the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. He was not afraid that the 10,000-year-old fire spirit would not listen to him. This. What kind of nonsense is Yiguchen talking about? Everyone was stunned. Gu Beihan and the others were even more confused. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was so obedient, there would be no need to suppress it with the giant bronze tower. However, as soon as Yiguchen finished speaking, the entire bronze pagoda shook violently. Then, a second time. A third time. Finally, under everyone's shocked and dazed gazes, the giant bronze tower cracked and then started to collapse. An endless amount of primal chaos divine flame surged out, and a strange fire spirit that looked like a Qilin roared at the sky while engulfed in divine flames. Chapter 1365. The primal chaos divine fire roiled in the air. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit that looked like a Qilin broke out of the tower and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was stunned. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. The expressions on their faces froze at the same time. The giant bronze tower had been passed down from the ancestors of the divine artifact sect to suppress the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. But now, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had destroyed it. Most importantly, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to have broken out of the tower because of Yi Guqin's summons. This was simply inconceivable and unbelievable. This, Gu Beihan opened his mouth slightly, but he was speechless and could not say anything. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit was the foundation of the divine artifact sect, but now, it had broken out of seclusion because of Yi Guqin. Yang Qi, Song Feiqian, and the others were also stunned. Even Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling, and the rest, who were on Yi Guqin's side, were in a daze. Clearly, they had never expected this to happen. How is this possible? How can he control the 10,000-year-old fire spirit? Even Xiao Gongqing was shocked. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit could be controlled so easily, he would have been tempted long ago. Nangong Huajing covered her mouth with her hand, shocked beyond words. As for Nangong Jueyan, he seemed to have lost his soul. Yi Guqin had exceeded his expectations time and time again. He was almost numb to it. Everyone was shocked. At the same time, they were wondering what Yi Guqin's next move was. Yi Guqin raised his hand and beckoned. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to be driven by him. It rushed directly toward the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo. I understand now. Yi Guqin wants to use the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's power to fuse the innate sword embryo with the embryo. An elder of the divine artifact sect shouted. This kind of spending could not be said to be small. No, he was using the resources of the divine artifact sect to forge a sword for himself. Ha, Yi Guqin, you're really something, aren't you? Even my divine artifact sect has fallen into your trap. Gu Beihan shook his head and sighed. He finally understood why Yi Guqin was here to participate in the young sect master selection. It wasn't just to help Mo Tianfeng win the bet. He also wanted to obtain the identity of the young sect master to reduce the pressure on him. Now, even the 10,000-year fire spirit was used by him to forge a sword for him. It could be said that Divine Tools sect had completely given Yi Guqin a gift. But he couldn't blame Yi Guqin. I finally know why even the Overlord class factions have to suffer in front of this kid. He's so meticulous. Duan Tianfeng, your standards are still as high as ever. Gu Beihan sighed and looked at Duan Tianfeng. Hee, this kid is always unexpected. I'm getting used to it. Mo Tianfeng laughed. Then, everyone's eyes gathered on Yi Guqin. Because as long as his results were out, the entire young sect master selection would be almost certain. Roar! The 10,000-year fire spirit's lifeline was in Yi Guqin's hands. Therefore, no matter how unwilling it was, it could only forge a sword for Yi Guqin. The 10,000-year fire spirit was a spiritual intelligence derived from the chaos divine fire. The energy it contained far surpassed Yi Guqin's. The violent chaos divine fire burned the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo. With the support of the 10,000-year fire spirit's energy, the two slowly merged together. With the innate sword embryo as the core, the sword embryo was wrapped around the outside. The innate sword embryo itself had the attributes of sharpness and indestructibility. It was even better than the best divine tool. This time, Nangong Juyun panicked. Finally, at some point, the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo completely merged together. In an instant, the sound of the sword resonated in the 9 heavens. Everyone seemed to hear the sound of the sword resonating in their ears. 10,000-year fire spirit, merge. Yi Guqin shouted coldly once again. After the fusion, a burst of light burst out from the sword. The 10,000-year fire spirit roared, but it was still absorbed into the sword embryo. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yiguchin had sealed the 10,000-year fire spirit into the sword embryo? How could he do that? Even Nangong Juyun was dumbfounded. This kid. Gu Beihan was stunned. First Elder Yang Qi's eyes also popped out. Yiguchin had sealed the 10,000-year fire spirit, the core of Divine Tool sect, into his sword embryo? Everyone was shocked. As for Yiguchin, his expression was focused and he was not affected at all. If he wanted to forge a sword embryo, he naturally had to be the best in every aspect. The 10,000-year fire spirit was extremely powerful. It could be sealed into the sword embryo as a trump card. As for angering Divine Tool sect, Yiguchin naturally had a way to ensure that Divine Tool sect could still use the Chaos Divine Fire safely. Next, the most important step is to completely unleash the taboo forging technique. Yiguchin's eyes flashed. He raised his hand and slapped his chest. He spat out a mouthful of his heart's blood, which splashed onto the sword embryo and sizzled. What is Yiguchin doing? Is he harming himself? No, he's probably going to use the forbidden art. Everyone's attention was focused. Even Gu Beihan and the others temporarily put aside the matter of the 10,000-year fire spirit and watched closely. Not enough. Yiguchin raised his eyebrows. He used some more heart's blood, but his face paled a lot. However, the sword embryo was covered in a layer of faint bloody light, as if it was resonating with Yiguchin. Essence blood alone isn't enough. Refining a sword embryo with a human soul and dual cultivating sword embryo and life requires a soul as well. Yiguchin gritted his teeth and the sea of consciousness in his mind began to work furiously. Then, Yiguchin split a part of his sea of consciousness origin. The last time he split his sea of consciousness origin was to refine his clone, Duguchilma. To a certain extent, this sword embryo could be considered another clone of his. The pain of splitting one's sea of consciousness origin was more painful than being torn apart by 5 horses or being cut into pieces. Even with Yiguchin's temperament, his lips turned pale and his body trembled slightly. Splitting one's sea of consciousness origin. Heavens, he's crazy. Seeing Yiguchin's crazy scene, everyone felt their hair stand on end. Now they knew why this art of forging was called a forbidden art. It was not something that ordinary blacksmiths could perform. If one was not careful and made a mistake, their sea of consciousness might collapse and their vitality would perish. The separated sea of consciousness origin was also integrated into the sword embryo. In an instant, Yiguchin felt as if there was a soul link between him and the sword embryo. At this point, all the steps were finally completed. Next, there was only one last step, and that was the heavenly tribulation baptism. Rumble. Dark clouds loomed over the horizon, as if the end of the world had arrived and was about to destroy everything. Why do I feel like this heavenly tribulation is much bigger than Nangong Juyun's? Looking at the rolling dark clouds, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, streaks of rainbow-colored lightning rolled in the clouds, roaring like angry dragons. Is that the rainbow lightning tribulation? Gu Beihan's heart trembled violently. As the sect master of Divine Artifacts sect, he could not help but lose his composure. Chapter 1366. As everyone knew, the reason why Divine Weapons of Tribulation were called Divine Weapons of Tribulation was because they were extremely powerful and could trigger the power of tribulation. As long as they could survive the tribulation, the quality of the weapon would change. The thunder tribulation that an ordinary heavenly tribulation weapon would attract was just an ordinary one. However, there were also some rare godly weapons or special godly weapons whose quality was too heaven-defying. The lightning tribulation they attracted was not ordinary lightning tribulation, but special lightning tribulation. Generally speaking, the more colors there were in the tribulation lightning, the more powerful the weapon was. However, Yiguchin's weapon had triggered the 7-color tribulation lightning. It was unbelievable. Even Gu Beihan's eyes widened in disbelief. What kind of weapon did Yiguchin forge? The weapon I forged only triggered the 5-color tribulation lightning at most, but this guy triggered the 7-color tribulation lightning. Gu Beihan was shocked. He was not the only one. All the elders and disciples of the artifact sect were stunned. They could not believe what they were seeing. Who would have thought that a 6-star blacksmith could forge a weapon that triggered the 7-color tribulation lightning? 7-color tribulation lightning. Ha, as expected of little Yi. Duan Tianfeng could not stop laughing. It could be said that as long as Yi Gu Chen's magical weapon could withstand the baptism of the 7-colored thunder tribulation, the outcome of the young master selection was almost certain. Young Master Yi can create miracles no matter where he is. It's amazing. Gu Xiangling's heart was also pounding. Yi Guchen was too outstanding. He was so outstanding that even her heart was moved. 7-color tribulation lightning. This guy triggered the 7-color tribulation lightning. How is that possible? Xiao Gongshu's face was extremely pale. He thought that Nangong Ju Yun would be able to forge the yin-yang dual swords. However, the 7-color tribulation lightning was like a slap to his face. Xiao Gongshu, you don't have to do this. Maybe Yi Guchen's weapon can't survive the 7-color tribulation lightning. Nangong Huajing comforted him. However, to be honest, even she was worried. As for Nangong Juyun himself, his face was tense as he looked at the 7-color tribulation lightning descending from the sky. The pride in his heart and his pride in the path of smithing were completely shattered by the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster. He dared not believe that Yi Guchen was more outstanding than him in smithing art. Impossible, it can't be. Your divine weapon can't withstand the baptism of the 7-colored lightning tribulation. Nangong Juyun could no longer maintain the image of a noble young master. His eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body was trembling. Everyone's gaze fell upon the divine weapon that Yi Guchen had forged. Yi Guchen stood in the air with his hands clasped behind his back. He raised his head and looked at the sky, watching the 7-colored lightning tribulation crash onto the divine weapon. Scorching lightning exploded in the void, as if it was going to blind everyone's eyes. Yi Guchen's black hair fluttered in the wind. His expression was calm and there was a hint of confidence on his face. He knew that the divine weapon he forged would not disappoint him. As expected, an endless amount of sword chi burst out in the void, shaking the surroundings. Even the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster looked like it was about to be shaken off. Moreover, Yi Guchen had fused the heavenly tribulation blue gold into the divine weapon. This kind of sacred material could greatly increase the divine weapon's ability to withstand the baptism of the lightning tribulation. Therefore, although the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster looked terrifying, it could not destroy the divine weapon that Yi Guchen had forged. Boom! 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 Dark clouds rolled, and lightning roared. It was as if the heavens did not want such a heaven-defying divine weapon to appear in the world, so it sent down a tribulation. However, no matter how the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster struck, it could not destroy the divine weapon. Instead, it tempered the divine weapon even more. The lightning tribulation continued for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster finally dispersed unwillingly. In the sky, a bright and dazzling sword shone with a shocking sword light. The sword was 5 feet long, and the body of the sword was dazzling. It was surrounded by the chaotic aura that belonged to the innate sword embryo. At the same time, the colorful chaotic divine flame rose from the blade of the sword. The spiritual chi in the surroundings automatically flowed into the sword. When they saw the sword, everyone's eyes were filled with amazement. It was the first time they had seen a divine weapon that could cultivate on its own and absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. 100 Calamity Divine Weapon. This sword has withstood hundreds of lightning tribulations and has transformed into 100 Calamity Divine Weapon, a blacksmith said after taking a deep breath. In these 3 days and 3 nights, the sword had withstood hundreds of lightning tribulations, so it was 100 Calamity Divine Weapon. In the future, when Yi Guchen found other materials and fused them into the sword, its quality would be improved. When Yi Guchen saw the divine weapon, his heart stirred. As if it had been summoned, the sword broke through the air and flew toward him. It was so fast that it seemed to have traveled through the void. That was the ability given by the Void Mother Gold. Yiguchin raised his hand and the sword fell into his hand. In an instant, Yiguchin felt as if his blood was connected to the sword. This sword would accompany him on his path of swordsmanship. Yiguchin extended a finger. With a poof, a wisp of chaotic divine fire rose. Then, Yiguchin's finger landed on the end of the sword near the hilt and wrote 2 words. Seeking defeat. From now on, this sword's name is Seeking Defeat. With a sword in hand, I only seek defeat. As soon as Yiguchin finished speaking, the Seeking Defeat sword seemed to have been summoned. The sword vibrated and countless chaotic sword rays burst out, piercing through the void. Yiguchin felt a sense of joy. It was a sense of joy that came from the sword of death-seeking. This was a sword with spirituality. What a powerful spirituality! Will this sword nurture a sword spirit in the future? If that's the case, won't it reach the level of a famed ancient sword? Some elders of the divine artifact sect were stunned. With the Seeking Defeat sword in hand, Yiguchin suddenly had a heroic aura that seemed to be able to cut through the heavens. I want this Seeking Defeat sword to be the sharpest and strongest sword in the world. Cut through the heavens and earth, cut through the sun, moon, and stars. Yiguchin's black hair danced in the wind as he stood in the sky with the sword in his hand. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Yiguchin was very ambitious. His expectations for the Seeking Defeat sword were not just limited to being 100 calamity divine weapon. Yiguchin looked at Nangong Ju-yun, whose face was extremely pale. Nangong Ju-yun, do you still want to compete? Yiguchin's words made Nangong Ju-yun's pale face even paler. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Compete? How should they compete? Now, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Yiguchin's sword of begging for defeat was definitely better than his sword of yin and yang. The result of the young sect master selection had been completely decided. No, I won't accept this. Nangong Ju-yun stared at Yiguchin. Alright, I'll make you accept this. Seeing this, Yiguchin said coldly and swung his hand. The Seeking Defeat sword slashed at the yin-yang dual swords with a monstrous chaotic sword ray. Clang! The sound of metal clashing reverberated between heaven and earth. Chapter 1367. Sparks flew as sword radiance filled the sky. Yiguchin did not hesitate at all. He immediately took out the sword of defeat and clashed with Nangong Ju-yun's yin-yang dual swords. This was the simplest and most direct way to test the quality of a divine weapon. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the yin-yang dual swords were sent flying by the sword of defeat. A huge crack appeared on the body of the sword. One could imagine that the sword of defeat could break the yin-yang dual swords if they clashed 2 more times. The quality of the divine weapon was obvious. This. Nangong Ju-yun felt as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat and he could not utter a single word. Are you satisfied now? Yiguchin said indifferently. Nangong Ju-yun's face turned purple as he looked at the yin-yang dual swords that were covered in cracks. His body trembled. He had lost. Nangong Ju-yun, who was said to be invincible in the art of forging, had lost in the end. Even his Tao heart had started to crack because of this cruel reality. As one of the 10 great young masters and born in a top overlord family, Nangong Ju-yun's life had always been smooth sailing. This was the first time he had suffered such a crushing defeat. How could this be? Nangong Huajing's face turned pale. Meanwhile, Xiao Gongshu's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Their painstaking plan had been ruined because of Yiguchin's appearance. This was not just a failure. It was also related to whether Xiao Gongshu could control divine weapon sect. However, all their plans had been ruined because of Yiguchin. Gu Beihan did not know what to feel when he saw this result. He was relieved that Nangong Ju-yun did not win the position of young sect master. However, Yiguchin would be troublesome if he became the young sect master. Not to mention that he had taken away the 10,000-year fire spirit of divine weapon sect. Although Yi Guqin's performance had surprised Gu Beihan, it could not make up for the trouble that Yi Guqin had brought. Gu Beihan sighed in his heart, but he still had to announce the result. He took a step forward and said, "Everyone, I'm sure everyone is well aware of the results of the young sect master selection. So, this sect master announces." Just as Gu Beihan was about to announce the result, Xiao Gongshu stepped forward and said, "Sect master, please wait. I feel that there is still room for discussion in this competition." Gu Beihan frowned slightly. Duan Tianfeng also raised his eyebrows. He had also expected that Master Xiao would not give up so easily after losing. "What do you mean by that?" Gu Beihan asked in a low voice. Xiao Gongshu's expression was indifferent as he asked, "When this fellow was smithing, he integrated his innate divine ability, the innate sword embryo. I wonder if this is in accordance with the rules. Furthermore, he sealed the 10,000-year-old fire spirit of our sect into his own sword without permission. This alone is a great crime, enough to strip him of all qualifications." Master Zhao's words caused the surroundings to fall silent for a moment. The so-called innate sword embryo was Yi Guqin's divine ability in the first place. He could use it if he wanted to. Xiao Gongshu was just twisting words and twisting logic. As for the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, Yi Guqin was indeed responsible for it, but this would have to be discussed later. Moreover, if Yi Guqin became the young sect master of divine artifact sect, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit would not be considered an outsider. In short, if Master Xiao lost, he was just being picky and didn't want to admit the final result. "Master Xiao, can you be any more shameless?" Duan Tianfeng was so angry that he stomped his foot. Even Nangong Huajing's beautiful face looked a little unnatural. Master Zhao's method was indeed disgraceful. However, Master Xiao did not care. He would never let Yi Guqin become the young sect master. "Master Xiao, aren't you being a little too forceful? The innate sword embryo is Yi Guqin's. As for the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, it's not impossible to discuss it later." Gu Beihan frowned. "I'm just speaking the truth," Master Xiao said with a cold expression. Yi Guqin looked at Master Xiao and narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to speak, a sigh came from an elder of divine artifact sect. Everyone looked over and was slightly surprised. "It's the 9th elder of divine artifact sect." "What does he mean?" The 9th elder of divine artifact sect was a tall and thin middle-aged man. He looked a little hesitant, but after a long while, he sighed and said, "Master Xiao, it's about time. What can you do even if you admit defeat?" Gu Beihan and the others' eyes flashed at the 9th elder's words. What did he mean? Master Xiao was expressionless, but a cold glint flashed through his eyes. The 9th elder shook his head and sighed when he saw Master Zhao's icy expression. "Back then, you defeated senior brother Duan Tianfeng because of some tricks. Are you going to do it again?" As soon as these words came out, the whole place fell into a dead silence. What did the 9th elder mean by that? Duke Xiao's complexion turned ashen at a speed visible to the naked eye. He said coldly, "9th elder, you're speaking nonsense again." "I'm not." The 9th elder exhaled deeply. He suddenly turned to Duan Tianfeng and clasped his hands. "My apologies, senior brother Duan Tianfeng. I feel guilty for what happened back then." "What do you mean?" Duan Tianfeng was a little confused and didn't know how to react. "In truth, Master Xiao was able to defeat you back then because he had me secretly tamper with your forging materials. That's why you lost to him," the 9th elder said apologetically. Everyone in the cauldron froze at the 9th elder's words. Gu Beihan and the others were even more shocked. So that's how it is. You. Duan Tianfeng's eyes lost focus and his voice trembled. He hadn't lost. Master Xiao had played tricks. "My apologies, senior brother Duan. I only spoke now because I couldn't stand Master Xiao trying to use tricks to influence the selection of the junior sect master," the 9th elder said. What nonsense are you talking about? Master Zhao's face was as cold as the frost in September. His expression was unprecedentedly ugly and he could no longer maintain his calm. What? Darling Xiao, is what he said true? Nangong Huajing widened her beautiful eyes in disbelief. She had always thought that Master Xiao had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. That was why she fell in love with him. Now, the ninth elder was saying that Master Xiao had defeated Duan Tianfeng by using tricks. This made Nangong Huajing dizzy. She couldn't believe it. No, it's not like that. Master Xiao gritted his teeth. He had never thought that the ninth elder would reveal the truth to the public at this moment. Master Xiao, stop and admit your defeat, the ninth elder said. No, you're slandering me. I didn't. Master Zhao's eyes began to turn red. He looked at Nangong Huajing and said, Huajing, you believe me, right? Nangong Huajing was in a daze. Her face was pale. She had never seen the shrewd Master Xiao lose his composure like that. The result was obvious. I even said that it was senior brother Duan's fate to lose to you. Now, the person who was fooled by fate is me, Nangong Huajing smiled with tears in her eyes. The most painful thing in the world was to entrust one's life to the wrong person. Chapter 1368. Back then, Nangong Huajing and Duan Tianfeng had been the closest of brothers and sisters. But Xiao Gongshu had interfered. In the end, the two of them had used the art of forging as a bet to determine the winner. The winner would remain in the divine artifact sect. The loser would lose everything and wander the world. In the end, Duan Tianfeng had lost. Nangong Huajing had thought that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. But now, after so many years, someone had told her that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng through underhanded means. Nangong Huajing couldn't accept this. She seemed to have lost her soul. Xiao Gongshu's hands were trembling. He looked around and found that the elders of the divine artifact sect were looking at him with indifference. Eunuch Zhao's expression was simply a confession without being pressed. Who would have thought that the great Beiyan artifact sovereign Xiao Gongshu would use such a method to defeat Duan Tianfeng? That's right. And here I thought that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. What right does he have to have such a status? Ha, I think that Xiao Gongshu's reputation will be ruined after this. After all, this method is a little underhanded. Some of the spectators whispered in hushed voices. Now that Xiao Gongshu was present, they didn't dare to say anything openly, but their eyes were full of disdain. One could imagine how bad Xiao Gongshu's reputation would be in the South Horizon region after today. You, Xiao Gongshu's face was ashen when he sensed the disdainful gazes. He glared at Yi Guqin. If Yi Guqin hadn't interfered, Nangong Juyun wouldn't have lost. His past wouldn't have been exposed like this. But now, Xiao Gongshu couldn't do anything to Yi Guqin. He flung his sleeves and turned to leave. But his back was a little hurried and disheveled. Nangong Huajing seemed to be in a daze. Her beautiful eyes turned to Duan Tianfeng, speechless for a moment. It was Xiao Gongshu who'd been deceiving her from the beginning. And the old man in front of her was the one who'd treated her sincerely. Even after so many years, Duan Tianfeng still hadn't forgotten her. As for Nangong Huajing herself, she had been mocking and ridiculing Duan Tianfeng and even advised him to live in seclusion. At this moment, Nangong Huajing's heart was filled with regret. A deep sense of regret spread through her heart. Senior brother Duan, Nangong Huajing's beautiful eyes reddened as she hesitated to speak. Duan Tianfeng wore a complicated look on his face. Did he love Nangong Huajing? Perhaps she used to love him very much. But now, when he saw the mature Nangong Huajing, he suddenly felt a little unfamiliar. Many beautiful things only belong to the past. Huajing, you don't have to say anything. I won't blame you. Let bygones be bygones. Duan Tianfeng shook his head. When Nangong Huajing heard this, her beautiful face instantly turned pale. She could hear a sense of distance in his words. It was impossible for Mo Tianfeng to be deeply in love with her. When she thought up to hear, Nangong Huajing's delicate figure trembled slightly, and then she turned around and left in a hurry. She was afraid that if she was a step too late, she would not be able to stop her tears from falling. Gu Beihan and the others from Divine Artifact sect sighed inwardly as they watched Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing leave. Who would have thought that the emotional entanglement between the three of them would end in such a way? Duan Tianfeng was not with Nangong Huajing. After Nangong Huajing learned of Xiao Gongshu's actions, it was clear that he would not be able to peacefully interact with Nangong Huajing. Perhaps this was fate playing tricks on people. Yi Guqin also sighed softly when he saw this. However, this was Duan Tianfeng's matter, so Yi Guqin would not comment on it. How could it be like this? Master, Nangong Jueyan's face was also pale. Even he did not know that his respected master had once done such a despicable thing. Nangong Jueyan's personality was not that of the righteous and upright type, and he was capable of all sorts of schemes. However, he had his own pride in the path of forging. No matter what, he would not use such a despicable method to obtain victory. At this moment, Nangong Jueyan's Dao heart suffered a huge blow. However, in the blink of an eye, he fixed his gaze on Yi Guqin. Other things aside, the position of junior sect master had been lost to him because of Yi Guqin. Nangong Jueyan's hatred for Yi Guqin was obvious. Yi Guqin, I will remember this. See you at Sky Burial Island. Nangong Jueyan put away the cracked yin-yang dual swords and turned to leave with a cold expression. His reputation as the divine weapon young master had been completely tarnished today. The elders of Divine Artifact sect finally breathed a sigh of relief after Nangong Jueyan left. In the end, Divine Artifact sect was not controlled by Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong family. Ha, Duan Tianfeng, congratulations. Yang Qi and the other elders cupped their hands at Duan Tianfeng. He had won the bet, which meant that his hands and identity would be restored. In truth, the bet was no longer valid the moment the truth was revealed. After all, Xiao Gongshu's victory was obtained through dirty and despicable means. Duan Tianfeng forced a smile, but he couldn't bring himself to be happy. After all, he was completely cut off from the past. Senior Duan Tianfeng, one must look forward. The future is promising. Yi Guqin stepped forward with a faint smile. Ha, you're right. It's time to let go. Duan Tianfeng laughed. However, Gu Beihan looked at Yi Guqin and frowned. Yi Guqin, you may have won the junior sect master selection, but you took away Divine Artifact sect's cornerstone treasure. How should we settle this? It wasn't that Gu Beihan was petty, but that the chaos divine flame of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was too important to Divine Artifact sect. Father, can you not be so harsh with your words? Gu Xiangling walked out with light steps and said reproachfully. This. Gu Beihan's expression froze. Was his daughter siding with an outsider? Seeing this, Yi Guqin shook his head and smiled. Don't worry, Sect Master Gu. I naturally wouldn't do such a thing. I have a way to allow Divine Artifact sect to safely use the Chaos Divine Flame. Oh. Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others raised their eyebrows at Yi Guqin's words. Yi Guqin had sealed the 10,000-year-old fire spirit into the sword of begging for defeat. What could he do? Yi Guqin raised his hand, and colorful Chaos Divine Flame immediately rose from the surface of the sword of begging for defeat. Then, a flame seed separated from the flame seed. This is the flame seed of the Chaos Divine Flame. It can also release Chaos Divine Flame without any hidden dangers, Yi Guqin said. His words caused the eyes of many Divine Artifact sect disciples to light up. They were most worried about being harmed by the Chaos Divine Flame when they came to the Sky Cauldron forging. Song Feichen, for example, was a very good example. But now, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had been sealed by Yi Guqin, and they could still safely use the Chaos Divine Flame. Not only was this not a loss for Divine Artifact Sect, but it was also a benefit. Chapter 1369. When Gu Beihan saw this, he was speechless. Losing the 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed like a huge loss. But in reality, they couldn't subdue the 10,000-year-old fire spirit even if they had it. They could only use the bronze tower to suppress it. And now, the bronze tower had been destroyed. Even if Yi Guqin returned the 10,000-year-old fire spirit to the sect, they couldn't find a good way to contain it. The Flame of Chaos, on the other hand, had no such worries. It wasn't as violent as the 10,000-year-old fire spirit that would hurt people at the slightest provocation. Therefore, to a certain extent, Yi Guqin had helped Divine Artifact Sect solve a thorny problem. Father, Sir Yi has already shown his sincerity. Besides, we only need the Flame of Chaos. Gu Xiangling continued to assist. Gu Beihan was speechless. Was this daughter really his biological daughter? Sigh, fine. You can keep the Flame of Chaos then. Consider it a bargain for you, kid, said Gu Beihan. Aside from the Flame of Primal Chaos, he was also doing this out of respect for forging Tianfeng. Duan Tianfeng was a great southern refiner and an 8-star Grandmaster Artificer. Now that he could recover his hands, he'd be a big shot again. Divine Artifact Sect couldn't trust Mr. Xiao anymore, so they had an excuse to expel him. They needed someone to replace him. Duan Tianfeng was undoubtedly someone the sect had to rope in. Besides, he was a member of the sect to begin with. Thinking of this, Gu Beihan said to Duan Tianfeng, I'll find someone to heal your hands. When the time comes, you can stay in Divine Artifact Sect and be an elder with peace of mind. Duan Tianfeng didn't immediately agree when he heard this. He was a member of Divine Artifact Sect in the first place and had feelings for the sect. He would naturally stay in the sect in the future. But before that, Duan Tianfeng had one more thing to do. That's not impossible, but I hope the sect master can agree to one thing, said Duan Tianfeng. What is it? Asked Gu Beihan. Since Yi Guqin has won the final victory, shouldn't the position of junior sect master be decided? Asked Duan Tianfeng. He was fighting for an identity for Yi Guqin. Although his identity as the young sect master of Divine Artifact Sect wasn't enough to intimidate the likes of Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Heavenly God Sword Sect, Dongfang Family, and Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. But at the very least, they would have some misgivings. After all, Divine Artifact Sect's influence wasn't small. Furthermore, these overlords would often purchase materials from the Divine Artifact Sect. This identity would cause the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion and the other powers to hesitate before making a move on him. Gu Beihan was at a loss for words. To be honest, if he could, he wanted to just let this matter slide. After all, as the sect master of the Divine Artifact Sect, he didn't want to get into trouble with Yi Guqin. Although the Overlord forces weren't crazy enough to eliminate Divine Artifact Sect because of this, they would still be in trouble. This matter. Gu Beihan was thinking of how to broach the subject. However, Gu Xiangling said, Father, the final results of the young sect master selection are out. Is there still a need to consider? Moreover, everyone has seen young Master Ye's performance. It can be said that no one is more suitable than him to be the young sect master. Hearing Gu Xiangling's words, the other Divine Artifact Sect disciples echoed her sentiments. After all, Yi Guqin had given them the benefit of being able to use the Chaos Divine Flame safely. Yi Guqin's lips curled into a smile when he saw this. He'd done a good job building a good relationship with Gu Xiangling. At this moment, the great elder, Yang Qi, stepped forward and said, Sect leader, I think Yi Guqin is qualified to be the young sect leader. Do you think those overlords would go against us just because of Yi Guqin? Do you think so as well? Gu Beihan sighed softly. To be honest, even he was shocked by Yi Guqin's talent in smithing. That sort of courting defeat definitely had a chance to evolve into an even stronger weapon in the future. However, she still had her misgivings. Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent when he saw this. He didn't ask Gu Beihan to give him the position of young sect master. Instead, he cupped his hands and said, "I've made things difficult for you, sect master. My main goal is to help Senior Tianfeng, not the position of young sect master. Since you've made things difficult for me, I'll take my leave." With that, Yi Guqin prepared to leave. "Sir Yi, please don't." Gu Xiangling's expression changed slightly. Gu Beihan's heart skipped a beat when he saw Yi Guqin's departing figure. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. It would be a great loss for Divine Artifact sect if they gave up on Yi Guqin. Gu Beihan didn't know why he had such a thought. However, he still blurted out, "Wait." Yi Guqin paused and turned to look at Gu Beihan. "Since you've won the position of young sect master, the position is naturally yours. Our Divine Artifact sect's reputation is unshakable." Many people were moved by Gu Beihan's words. They hadn't expected Divine Artifact sect to be so bold as to make Yi Guqin their junior sect master. This was practically inviting trouble onto themselves. Even Yi Guqin himself raised his eyebrows. He was a little surprised. He did not expect Gu Beihan to have such courage. He wasn't playing hard to get, but he really did want to leave. "Then I thank you, Sect Master Gu." Yi Guqin nodded. Since Gu Beihan was willing to make him Divine Artifact sect's junior sect master, Yi Guqin was naturally happy to do so. Having another identity was better than having none at all. Yi Guqin breathed a sigh of relief after everything was settled. The matter of the forging sky edge was finally resolved. The Divine Artifact sect disciples didn't object to this decision in the slightest. After all, they'd seen Yi Guqin's performance. He was indeed the best candidate to become junior sect master. As for Song Feichen, he'd long since given up hope. He knew that he couldn't compare to Yi Guqin anymore. Suddenly, the Divine Condor rolled his eyes and called out, "Eh? Why does Condor Grandpa seem to have heard that the person who becomes junior sect master can marry Miss Gu Xiangling?" The crowd quieted down at his words. The group of people had strange expressions on their faces. Gu Xiangling's face flushed red, like the rosy clouds reflecting the snow. Her beauty was unparalleled. Gu Beihan was taken aback. So Yi Guqin hadn't just become junior sect master, he'd also taken away the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Now, he was even going to kidnap his daughter. Gu Beihan glanced at Gu Xiangling out of the corner of his eye and saw that her head was lowered shyly. She didn't seem to reject the idea. Gu Beihan was a little speechless. When Gu Xiangling had learned that she could marry Nangong Jiuyan, she'd rather die than submit. But now, it was Yi Guqin's turn to have such an attitude. This was different from person to person, and there was a difference in treatment. Chapter 1370. However, Gu Beihan had already made up his mind about this matter. He could not allow Gu Xiangling and Yi Guqin to have a marriage alliance. At least not now. Because Sky Burial Island would be opened soon. Everyone in the South Sky region knew about the trouble Yi Guqin had caused. Who knew if Gu Xiangling would become a widow in a few months if they were to have a marriage alliance now? Moreover, even if this matter did not happen, Gu Beihan would not agree to it. Because it was too dangerous to be Yi Guqin's wife. He could not allow his daughter to be in danger. Just as Gu Beihan was about to find an excuse to decline, Yi Guqin spoke first. "Brother Condor, don't joke around. Miss Gu's life should be in her own hands. How can you speak so casually?" Yi Guqin shook his head. He naturally did not have any thoughts about Gu Xiangling. Right now, he only had one goal, and that was revenge. Other than that, love and romance had nothing to do with him. "No. I didn't." Gu Xiangling wanted to say something but stopped. She was actually slightly anxious. She did not open her mouth to object. Seeing this, the Divine Condor covered his eyes with his little wings. He shook his head and sighed, "You're hopeless. You're really a man of steel." Gu Beihan smiled faintly. He thought to himself that Yi Guqin was still sensible. He nodded slightly and said, "That's good. After all, they're both young people.
There's no need to rush such a big matter in life. Who knows, there might be another chance in the future. However, Gu Xiangling felt a faint sense of disappointment in her heart. She asked herself honestly. If she really allowed Yi Guqin to have a marriage alliance with her, she would not reject it. Instead, she would feel a trace of joy and anticipation. After all, who would not want their husband to be an indomitable man? Yi Guqin could be considered to be a perfect match for the image of a hero in her heart. Unfortunately, Gu Xiangling did not see a trace of interest in Yi Guqin's eyes. At most, they looked at each other like friends. Very well. Yi Guqin, in a few days, Divine Weapons Sect will hold a ceremony for you as the junior sect master. At that time, you will officially become the junior sect master of Divine Weapons Sect. Not just anyone can provoke you, Gu Beihan said. However, what he meant was that the Starry Sword Pavilion and the other overlord forces were not nobodies. Thank you, sect leader Gu. Yi Guqin cupped his fists. How could he not know what Gu's mind? However, Yi Guqin didn't think that his status as a young sect master was enough to make Celestial Artifact Sect and Starry Sword Pavilion go against each other. That was unrealistic. It would be enough as long as he could make those factions feel a little apprehensive. The junior sect master selection came to an end in such an unexpected manner. After that, Yi Guqin went into seclusion to adjust his breath. He placed the sword of begging defeat in his dantian to nourish it. It could be said that this sword was already a part of his life. Moreover, Yi Guqin knew that the 100 Calamity divine weapon was far from the end of the sword of begging defeat. This was a sword that could cultivate and grow on its own. Yi Guqin had long made up his mind. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to nurture the sword of defeat into an existence comparable to the famed ancient swords. At that moment, the sword of death-seeking was in Yi Guqin's dantian. It had shrunk to the size of a connate sword embryo. It was constantly absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and was growing with every passing second. Yi Guqin was also very curious about how powerful this sword would be in the future. In the art of swordsmithing, there is a saying of hiding the sword. Hiding the sword in the body, it is fine if it does not come out, but once it comes out, it will definitely take the enemy's head. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. He had already decided to nurture the sword of courting defeat in his dantian. For normal battles, he would use the 9-dragon thunder prison. When he really needed to use his full strength, he would directly use the sword of courting defeat. The power of this sword strike was earth-shattering. Because it was the energy that had been accumulated for a long time. When it was released all at once, it was equivalent to an explosion of energy after accumulation. Its power was naturally different from ordinary sword moves. Another trump card. Yi Guqin murmured. This meant that he was one step closer to killing Di Haotian with his own hands. After such a long delay in Heavenly Craftsmanship City, Burial Island is about to open. Yi Guqin took a deep breath. The real decisive battle was about to come. A few days later, the artifact sect was decorated with lanterns and streamers. A grand banquet was held for Yi Guqin's ascension to the position of junior sect master. It was believed that in a few days, the news that Yi Guqin had become the junior sect master of the artifact sect would spread from Heavenly Craftsmanship City to the entire South Horizon region. By then, countless people would be amazed by Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin had never liked this kind of banquet. After casually dealing with the guests, he went to a secluded courtyard to rest alone. A beautiful girl was leaning against a willow tree. She seemed to be in a daze, thinking about something. Suddenly, she saw Yi Guqin. Young Master Yi. Miss Gu. Yi Guqin smiled. This girl was Gu Xiangling. She was like a girl who had walked out of a painting. She was elegant and refined. Her face was like a painting. Yi Guqin had seen many girls, but it was rare to see a girl with such an outstanding temperament like Gu Xiangling. It seems that young Master Yi is also a person who likes peace and quiet. Gu Xiangling smiled. Yes. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. He didn't know what to say. Xiangling still has to thank young Master Yi.
Otherwise, the current me would very likely be in deep trouble, said Gu Xiangling. Actually, I was just doing it for myself. Yi Guqin said. Young Master Yi, are you leaving? Gu Xiangling suddenly asked. That's right. It's close to the opening of Sky Burial Island. I have to make preparations first. Yi Guqin said. Can we meet again in the future? Gu Xiangling suddenly said. She didn't dare to look directly at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin was stunned. However, he wasn't a fool. Although he was a little stubborn, how could he not understand Gu Xiangling's thoughts? However, sometimes, it was best not to say it out loud. Of course. I'm the young sect master of Divine Artifacts sect. We'll meet again in the future. Yi Guqin shook his head and smiled. Gu Xiangling blushed. She wanted to say something but couldn't. She also vaguely felt that someone had already occupied a place in Yi Guqin's heart. The two of them were silent. On the other side, Nangong Huajing was preparing to return to the Nangong family with Nangong Jueyan. The plan this time was a complete failure. Nangong Huajing felt empty in her heart. She had already decided to break up with Xiao Gongshu. Nangong Jueyan, on the other hand, was like a frosted eggplant. He no longer had his usual strategizing. His eyes were cold and filled with unwillingness. Sky Burial Island, Yi Guqin. This matter isn't over yet. Nangong Jueyan muttered to himself. In a spacious hall, Xiao Gongshu's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like a gloomy beast. Yi Guqin, it's all because of him. Xiao Gongshu took a deep breath. Then, he took out a pitch-black jade slip and crushed it. In less than 15 minutes. A slightly aged cackle could be heard. Xiao Gongshu, you still used this favor in the end. Chapter 1371. As the voice rang out, a skinny old man covered in a black cloak suddenly appeared in the hall like a ghost. Xiao Gongshu's expression did not change when he saw this. He said indifferently, the Blood Shadow Pavilion really is unpredictable. You guys are everywhere. Ha, of course. After all, we're an assassin organization. The black-robed old man snickered. The Blood Shadow Pavilion was a powerful assassin organization in the South Horizon region. Although it was not an overlord-level organization, it was still extremely powerful. In reality, there were many other overlord-level organizations in the South Horizon region apart from the 3 sects, 4 pavilions, and 5 clans. There were also many other organizations with extremely powerful sections. For example, the Artifacts sect and the Blood Shadow Pavilion. Xiao Gongshu took a deep breath and said, back then, I secretly forged a god weapon for the Blood Shadow Pavilion. You owe me a favor. Now, you have a chance to pay me back. The black-robed old man chuckled like a crow when he heard that. Let me think. Don't tell me you want us to assassinate Yi Guqin. Xiao Gongshu snorted coldly when he heard that. Since you understand, I don't need to say anything more. However, the black-robed old man became slightly troubled. Well, I'm afraid it'll be a little troublesome. What do you mean? Xiao Gongshu's eyes immediately sharpened. The only thought in his mind was to get rid of Yi Guqin. This was because Yi Guqin had single-handedly ruined his entire plan. However, Xiao Gongshu clearly could not do it himself. It just so happened that the Blood Shadow Pavilion owed him a favor, so he could use it now. However, the person in charge of the Blood Shadow Pavilion was actually beating around the bush and saying something like that. Xiao Gongshu's face darkened even more. The black-robed old man gently smiled when he saw this. Master Xiao, don't worry. You know that killing Yi Guqin is nothing, but there are too many implications. He was originally Jinkui from the Sword Dynasty. Now, the Sword Dynasty has become a saint ruler with the leader of the Sword Alliance, Ao Shenzhou, becoming a peak organization only second to the overlord-level organizations. And that Yu Kuan from the Holy Emperor realm seems to be related to Yi Guqin as well. Not to mention that Yi Guqin is now the junior sect master of Divine Artifacts sect. That's quite a high status. Think about it. If our Blood Shadow Pavilion kills Yiguchen, how much trouble will it cause? The black-robed elder's words caused Xiao Gongshu's already gloomy face to sink even further. However, he couldn't refute it because it was indeed the truth. Yiguchen was no longer the loner he had been in the infinite plains. The force behind him could not be underestimated. However, Xiao Gongshu still noticed that the black-robed old man's eyes flashed with a dark light. He came to a sudden realization and said in an indifferent tone, "Your Blood Shadow Tower is a profit-driven organization. When you're angry, you even dare to assassinate people from overlord forces. Tell me, what do you want?" Xiao Gongshu could tell at a glance that the black-robed old man wasn't completely rejecting him. A favor was not enough for Blood Shadow Pavilion to act. "Ha, Master Xiao, you are indeed wise. In fact, the conditions are very simple." "They couldn't be any simpler for you," the black-robed old man said with a smile. "Tell me," Xiao Gongshu said. "Master Xiao, I'm afraid it's very difficult for you to stay in Divine Artifact Sect now," the black-robed old man said meaningfully. "What do you mean?" Xiao Gongshu frowned. However, the black-robed old man was telling the truth. After his scheme had been exposed, it was indeed difficult for him to have a place in Divine Artifact Sect. He might even be expelled directly. "It's very simple. The Blood Shadow Pavilion welcomes Master Xiao very much," the black-robed old man said with a smile. Now, Xiao Gongshu completely understood. The Blood Shadow Pavilion wanted to rope him in. "Master Xiao, if you join us, you can directly become the high and mighty Deputy Pavilion Lord. As for Yiguchen, we'll also take care of him for you," the black-robed old man said. Xiao Gongshu's expression changed, but he agreed in the end. "Alright, that's fine. However, how are you going to assassinate Yiguchen?" Xiao Gongshu asked. "It's very simple. When Sky Burial Island opens, a group of prodigies from the Blood Shadow Pavilion will also enter. At that time, assassinating Yiguchen will be a piece of cake. Moreover, because it will be within Sky Burial Island, the faction behind him will not be able to find out," the black-robed old man said. "Alright. As long as you can kill Yiguchen, why not let me join the Blood Shadow Pavilion?" Xiao Gongshu made his decision. As expected of Master Xiao. Straightforward, the black-robed old man said with a smile. "Yiguchen, only your death can dispel the hatred in my heart." Xiao Gongshu muttered to himself. On the other side, Yiguchen did not know that an assassination plan had already begun. Yiguchen did not stay in Divine Artifact Sect for long before he returned to Sword Dynasty with the Divine Eagle and Blackie. As for Duan Tianfeng, he stayed in Divine Artifact Sect and became a great elder. Unsurprisingly, what happened in the Heavenly Craftsmanship City spread out in all directions in just a few days. Have you heard about what happened in Heavenly Craftsmanship City recently? Of course I have. That Yiguchen is too unexpected. Not only is he strong, but he also has such great strength in the way of forging. Yes. Nangong Jueyun is known as the young master of divine weapons. He specializes in forging. I did not expect that he would lose to Yiguchen. TSK. Yiguchen is not only the Jinkue of Sword Dynasty now. He is also the future master of Divine Artifact Sect. Sword Dynasty and Divine Artifact Sect are two major forces. Although they are not dominating forces, they are still top forces. Plus, there is that Luo Kun in Holy Emperor World. Yiguchen is not someone the Starry Sword Pavilion can mess with as they wish. That is not necessarily true. We still have to see the Battle of Sky Burial Island. Di Haotian of Divine Sword Sect will not let Yiguchen go. We will have a good show by then. Yiguchen's deeds were discussed everywhere in Nantian region. As for Yiguchen, he had already returned to the Sword Dynasty to make the final preparations. 2 months passed by very quickly. Yiguchen spent some time in Divine Artifact Sect. Therefore, not long after he returned to Sword Dynasty to cultivate in seclusion, the Battle of Sky Burial Island was approaching. This battle was not like the one in Holy Emperor World. The Battle of Holy Emperor World could be regarded as an internal struggle. The most excellent talents of Nantian region had to be selected. The Battle of Sky Burial Island was a battle between Nantian region and the Dark World. At that time, the talents of Nantian region would have to fight against the talents of the Dark World. Due to the special environment, the Dark World was full of fighting and killing. Therefore, the talents of the Dark World had more combat experience and skills than the talents of Nantian region, who lived like princes. It was also rumored that all the elites of the Dark World would participate in the Battle of Sky Burial Island. The small giants of the Dark World would appear one after another to hunt down the top talents of Nantian region. An ultimate battle was coming. Chapter 1372. The entire Nantian region was in an uproar because of what happened on Sky Burial Island. On the Starry Sword Pavilion's side, the atmosphere was a little gloomy. The Battle of the Sacred Emperor World was like a nightmare for the Starry Sword Pavilion. The 4 young Star Lords and Gu Xiaoyang, a total of 5 top geniuses, had all died at the hands of Yi Guqin. Song Yuyao and Zhou Heng had also died. Almost all of the famous 7 Big Dipper disciples of the Starry Sword Pavilion had died at the hands of Yi Guqin. It was definitely a big blow to the Starry Sword Pavilion. What was more infuriating was that the Starry Sword Pavilion was unable to kill Yi Guqin for the time being. They could only pursue the matter after the battle on Sky Burial Island. This made the elders of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion and the ordinary disciples feel aggrieved. Just as the Starry Sword Pavilion was shrouded in a gloomy cloud. In the depths of the Starry Sword Pavilion, a mountain suddenly burst out with dazzling purple brilliance. Vaguely, everyone seemed to see a purple Emperor star slowly flickering in the sky. That's the Ziwei Emperor star, could it be? Some elders of the Starry Sword Pavilion couldn't help but exclaim. As for the ordinary disciples, they all had puzzled looks on their faces. They only knew about the 7 Big Dipper disciples, but they didn't know that the Starry Sword Pavilion actually had other geniuses. At the moment when everyone's gazes were focused on the mountain peak, a voice suddenly rang out. Purple clouds spread out as if forming a purple cloud bridge. A beautiful figure stepped on the cloud bridge and slowly walked out. It was a tall and slender woman, dressed in a purple dress that wrapped around her slender and delicate body. Her long purple hair shone like a mirror, draping straight down like silk. Her face was white and exquisite. Her eyes were like stars, filled with purple light. 2 purple jade earrings hung on her snow-white earlobes, adding a touch of nobility and elegance to the woman. Many disciples of the Starry Sword Pavilion were dumbfounded when they saw the beautiful woman in the purple dress. But what made them even more shocked was that the woman in the purple dress faintly emitted an aura that had reached the 9th level of the Divine Dwelling Realm. She was only 1 step away from the venerables of the Heaven Palace. This shocked all the disciples of the Starry Sword Pavilion. What's going on? Since when did our Starry Universe Sword Pavilion have such a young genius? That's right. At such a young age, his cultivation has already reached the peak of the 9th layer of the Divine Dwelling Realm. Is he comparable to the heaven prides of the 4 emperors? Many disciples of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion were speechless. On the other hand, the elders of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion weren't too surprised, as they already knew that the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion had 2 supreme talents. The Son of 7 Stars and the Emperor Star Maiden. The purple-haired woman in front of him was the Purple Star Maiden, Jiang Ziwei. I didn't expect that the 7 Great Bears would all be defeated by one person. That person must be very unhappy, right? Jiang Ziwei thought to herself. The one she was referring to was none other than the Son of 7 Stars. The 7 Great Bears were originally just resources for the Sons of 7 Stars. But now, their resources had been destroyed by Yi Guqin, and the Sons of 7 Stars would have to delay for a while before they could be born. But now, because the Burial Sky Island was about to open, and the 7 Great Bears were all wiped out, the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion had no heaven prides to hold the fort, so they could only summon the Purple Star Maiden. I'm curious about Yi Guqin. What kind of person is he? Jiang Ziwei's eyes were filled with purple light, flickering slightly. But unfortunately, the Star Lord and the others have instructed me to find out the whereabouts of the God Devourer sword in the Burial Sky Island, and then kill Yiguchen. Jiang Ziwei shook her head slightly, her delicate face looking very calm. It seemed that it wasn't too difficult for her to deal with Yiguchen. With the Purple Star Maiden's birth, our Starry Universe Sword Pavilion will be able to turn the tide and fight again. Many elders of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion were excited. In the Heavenly God Sword Sect, a handsome young man in white robes walked towards a forbidden area with a formation. This young man was Chu Xuanzhen. After stepping into the forbidden area, he looked around and saw a young man with a perfect temperament sitting cross-legged on a futon. Inside the formation, many strange fires of heaven and earth were burning the human sovereign sword. The golden crystals on the surface of the human sovereign sword had melted a lot. The young man was wearing a loose white robe, and his skin was as clear as jade, shining brightly. His long golden hair was extremely dazzling, and his silver eyes were as deep as the moon. He was handsome, and his temperament was natural, as if he was the most perfect work of God, not a bit more, not a bit less. He had an otherworldly and noble temperament, and he didn't look like a mortal. This was the perfect temperament that only a 10th grade supreme talent could have. Who else could this young man be but Di Haotian? Greetings, senior brother Haotian. I'm Chu Xuanzhen. Chu Xuanzhen cupped his hands slightly. Is the sacred imperial world over? Di Haotian asked. He had been cultivating in seclusion in the forbidden area, and he didn't want anyone to disturb him, so he didn't know much about what was going on outside. Chu Xuanzhen looked a little ashamed and said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, senior brother Haotian. I didn't get the best in the sacred imperial world. Oh, except for a few people like Huang Qianqiu and Jun Xiaoyao, you should be able to rank at the top, Di Haotian said. I didn't expect that Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty to be Yiguchen. He hit it too well. A cold light flashed in Chu Xuanzhen's eyes. Just as Chu Xuanzhen finished speaking, Di Haotian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and an invisible aura spread out, making Chu Xuanzhen and the other supreme talents feel a little suffocated. He is indeed a venerable of the heavenly palace. Chu Xuanzhen was shocked. You mean Yiguchen? Di Haotian asked. Yiguchen was still fresh in Di Haotian's memory. After all, Yiguchen was the only one who had severely injured him among his peers. Before this, almost no other supreme talent of the same generation could seriously injure Di Haotian. That was why he remembered it so clearly. Yes, this is what happened. Following that, Chu Xuanzhen told Di Haotian everything that had happened in the Sacred Emperor realm in detail. After listening, Di Haotian said calmly, I didn't expect that the ant from back then to have grown to this level. Di Haotian's expression was still calm, like a god. In his opinion, Yiguchen was able to severely injure him not because of Yiguchen's own strength. Instead, it was because Yiguchen had taken the 9 Deaths No Regrets elixir, and then somehow borrowed a trace of the Celestial Emperor Sword's power to injure him. In short, Yiguchen did not rely on his own strength, but on external objects. Therefore, Di Haotian thought that Yiguchen was just an ant. Senior brother Haotian, you don't have to do anything. I can kill Yiguchen, Chu Xuanzhen said confidently. He was also a supreme talent. Previously, when he was in the sacred imperial realm, he did not have the chance to fight with Yiguchen. I will also go to the burial island this time. If I am too lazy to do anything, then you can kill him, Di Haotian waved his hand and said casually. Yes. Chu Xuanzhen said while holding his fists together. Yiguchen, this time, can you borrow the power of the 9 Deaths No Regrets elixir and the Celestial Emperor sword? If I bring the human ruler's sword, I wonder what kind of expression you will show. Di Haotian's lips curled into a faint smile. This time, he would bring the human ruler's sword. This was because Di Haotian had read many ancient books. It was very likely that there was something he wanted on Burial Sky Island. The Earth Ruler's Sword. Chapter 1373. 2 months had passed since the end of the battle in the Sacred Imperial Realm. These 2 months were supposed to be a peaceful period of preparation for war. However, there was one thing that ignited public opinion in the entire Nantian region. Yi Guqin had defeated the divine weapon prince, Nangong Ju Yun, in the art of smithing and became the young sect leader of the divine weapon sect. When everyone heard about this, their first reaction was to be astonished. That's right, astonishment. Yi Guqin's name was naturally well known in the Nantian region, but he was more famous in the art of swordsmanship and martial arts. As for the art of forging, not many people knew about it. Even though some people knew that Yi Guqin was the disciple of the South Forging Saint, Forge Tianfeng, they did not think that his smithing skills were that great. However, Yi Guqin's performance in the selection of the young master could be said to be amazing. Even Nangong Ju Yun, who specialized in forging, was defeated by Yi Guqin. TSK, Yi Guqin is really a monster. Did he start cultivating in his mother's womb? But to be honest, although Yi Guqin's performance was amazing, he might not be able to survive the burial island. That's right. Even though he's the sword champion of the Sword Dynasty and the young master of the Divine Artifact sect, he's still a little weak compared to the Celestial God Sword sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, Dongfang clan, and other forces. The entire Nantian region was talking about Yi Guqin. At this moment, Yi Guqin himself was in the Sword Dynasty, making the final preparations. In the sky, several large ships were floating in the void. Yi Guqin and the other swordsmen of the Sword Dynasty were standing among them. Zhao Xiaodi, the princess of the War God Dynasty, was also standing beside Yi Guqin. As for Jun Xiaoyao, Zhao Shinkong, and the others, they had already returned to their respective forces to rest and prepare for the burial island. As for Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others, they would follow Yi Guqin to Sky Burial Island. However, they would not participate in the Battle of Sky Burial Island. Yan Wushuang and the others were self-aware. The outside world knew that they had a close relationship with Yi Guqin. If they participated in Sky Burial Island and were not strong enough, not only would they be in danger, but they would also implicate Yi Guqin. Because of that, Yan Wushuang and the others would only follow him and not enter Sky Burial Island. In addition, the proud divine continent, Confuzi, and Wu Hongyan were also present. In the Sword Dynasty, only Ling Qianhen and the other saints were left behind. Yi Guqin, I will go with you this time. No matter what, I will do my best to protect you. The proud divine continent spoke, its tone resolute. Many thanks to Senior Proud Divine Continent. Yi Guqin slightly cupped his hands. As for the Yukuan, Beimiao, the North Nether King, it had already left the Sword Dynasty a month ago. No one knew where it had gone. However, Yi Guqin believed that it must have been secretly observing him. Sky Burial Island, this day has finally come. Yi Guqin stood on the deck of the ship with his hands behind his back. His black hair fluttered in the wind. Although he did not deliberately reveal his aura, there seemed to be sword intent and battle intent rising in the void. He hadn't forgotten what had happened at the infinite desolate plains until now. It was still vivid in his mind. Su Jianshi had sacrificed herself in front of him and was sealed in the human sovereign sword. Di Haotian had used a high and mighty tone to judge him like a god. Now, Yi Guqin believed that even without the power of the Nine Deaths Regretless Pill and the Celestial Emperor's sword, he could fight Di Haotian with his own strength. Not to mention, he still had his strongest trump card. Dugu begging demons. Just as Yi Guqin and the people of the Sword Dynasty were about to set off for Sky Burial Island. On the side of the Mola Dynasty, a black ship rose into the sky. Dugu begging demons and Princess Luoho stood on the deck. He wore a black robe and had 3,000 feet of white hair. His dark golden right eye was deep and charming. His handsome and charming face was expressionless, and his aura was cold and evil. Beside him, Princess Luoho looked at Dugu begging demons and wanted to say something. Begging demons, what is the relationship between you and Yi Guqin? Princess Luoho bit her red lips and asked. Because Dugu begging demons had treated Yi Guqin very strangely in the Sacred Emperor realm. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, Dugu begging demons said indifferently. Yes. Princess Luoho lowered her head. She had a cold and domineering personality, but in front of the even colder and more domineering Dugu begging demons, she could only bow her head. Di Haotian, let's settle all our grudges in the sacred emperor realm. Dugu begging demons whispered in his heart. Yi Guqin's grudge was his grudge. The entire Nantian region was stirred because of the incident on Zhangtian Island. The sword pavilions all set off. On the Luofu sword pavilion's side, Jun Xiaoyao also set off. His white sleeves fluttered in the wind like a banished immortal. He was elegant and handsome. The final battle on Zhangtian Island. I think Brother Yi and Di Haotian will have a life and death battle. I hope he can be safe, Jun Xiaoyao murmured. He did not say that he hoped Yi Guqin could defeat Di Haotian, because that would be too difficult. Di Haotian's reputation was not built in a day or two. It was a reputation that had been accumulated over a long time. He and Gu Xiaoyang were definitely not on the same level. On the Misty Sword Pavilion's side, Yizang Yue also set off. Her feelings toward Yi Guqin were complicated. But she was sure that she did not want to see Yi Guqin fall in the hands of Di Haotian. On the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion's side, Huang Qianqiu also came out of seclusion. As one of the 4 emperors, his cultivation had improved again after the Sacred Emperor realm. He had reached the peak of the 9th level of the Divine Dwelling realm, and was only a step away from the Venerable of the Celestial Palace. This trip to Zhangtian Island will be an opportunity for me to break through to the Venerable realm. And Yi Guqin, no matter what, he will not be able to walk out of Zhangtian Island alive, Huang Qianqiu whispered. Because there were too many people who wanted to kill Yi Guqin on Zhangtian Island. Di Haotian, Chu Xuanzhen, and Huang Qianqiu. Any one of them was an absolutely strong opponent. On the Starry Sword Pavilion's side, the Ziwei Star Maiden, Jiang Ziwei, boarded a flying boat and flew across the sky. Yi Guqin, I'm really curious what kind of person he will be. Not only the sword pavilions, but the 3 major sects also took action. On the Heavenly God's Sword sect's side, a golden dragon boat rose into the sky. It was dazzling and magnificent. Countless disciples of the Heavenly God's Sword sect looked up, their faces full of admiration and respect. It's senior brother Haotian, he finally came out of seclusion. Who can stop senior brother Haotian when he comes out of seclusion? Whether it's the Nantian region or the Dark World, there are probably not many heaven prides who can compete with senior brother Di Haotian. Yes, even Yi Guqin, who has been in the limelight recently, can only die in front of senior brother Di Haotian. Yes, a person who relied on external objects to hurt senior brother Haotian, what qualifications does he have to be called a heaven pride? The disciples of the Heavenly God's Sword sect all admired Di Haotian. In their view, Yi Guqin only relied on external objects to luckily injure Di Haotian. If it was a real battle, Yi Guqin would definitely not be Di Haotian's opponent. Everyone in the Heavenly God's Sword sect thought so. Chapter 1374. On the Battle God Saber sect's side, Dao Wumeng and Gu Zun were also prepared. Especially Gu Zun. His hair was unkempt and his beard was unkempt, but no one in the Battle God Saber sect dared to underestimate him. Although the battle between prodigies wasn't over yet, Gu Zun was already on the Battle God Saber sect's side. I heard that Gu Zun has a grudge with Yi Guqin in the past. I heard that too. The two seemed to have engaged in a sword and saber duel. Although Yi Guqin won in the end, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Gu Zun is really unique to be able to push Yi Guqin to that extent. Many Battle God Saber sect disciples whispered to each other. Gu Zun, you don't have to do this. Even if you don't do anything, Yi Guqin won't be able to survive Sky Burial Island, Dao Wumeng said, shaking his head. Gu Zun's expression didn't change as he said in a hoarse voice, you're wrong. Killing Yi Guqin isn't my goal. Ending things with him and having a sword and saber duel is my goal, said Gu Zun. If he only wanted Yi Guqin dead, he could have just watched Di Haotian, Chu Xuanzhen, Huang Qianqiu, and the others kill Yi Guqin. But if he didn't have a sword and saber duel with Yi Guqin, his obsession would never be removed. Yi Guqin, I'll end things on Sky Burial Island, even if it's for him. Gu Zun murmured. The him he was referring to was his former master, Yu Bufan. Unfortunately, he couldn't say that name again. The Demonic Destroyer Sect. In a continuous stretch of pitch-black mountain range. Suddenly, a strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. 10 huge pitch-black demonic figures stood tall in the sky. Each of them was like the king of hell, emitting a bone-chilling aura that made one's heart palpitate. That phenomenon, is it Holy Yama? Is he finally coming out of seclusion? This phenomenon attracted the attention of many elders and disciples of the demonic extermination sect. On top of a mountain, Wan Er's tall and slim figure stood tall and straight. The black dress outlined her devilish figure. Her beautiful face was covered with a black veil, only revealing a pair of watery eyes. Is the Yama King finally coming out? Wan mumbled to herself. Her eyes were filled with seriousness. The Holy Yama was simply too powerful. He was one of the 4 emperors, Hades, and was on par with Huang Qianqiu. Boom! Just as Wan was thinking about this, a loud explosion came from the mountains not far away. Then, a silhouette broke out and stood in the sky. It was a young man in a pitch-black robe with dark golden patterns on the edges of his sleeves. His appearance was handsome, but his skin was abnormally pale, without the slightest trace of blood. His eyes were completely devoid of white and filled with darkness, just like the eyes of a devil. 10 pitch-black Yama Kings circled around him. That was his innate talent phenomenon, the 10 Kings of Hell. The Holy Yama himself was like the ruler of the 10 Kings of Hell. He looked around and saw Wan Er. Immediately, his body moved and turned into a wisp of black smoke. The next moment, he appeared in front of Wan Er. Wan Er, I didn't expect you to be here waiting for me to come out. The Holy Yama smiled wickedly. His pitch-black eyes scanned Wan Er's graceful body up and down. He didn't hide it at all. Wan Er frowned, and a tinge of annoyance appeared in her beautiful eyes. Although she had the title of demoness and looked unrestrained, she was actually very protective of her body. She hadn't even let other men touch her jade-like hands. The Holy Yama had always been lusting after her, and he didn't hide it. This was why Wan Er was disgusted. You think too much. I just want to see how much you've improved. It seems that you still haven't broken through to the Celestial Palace Honorable Realm, Wan said, pursing her lips. Haha, it's not that easy to break through to the Celestial Palace Honorable Realm. However, I have the chance to do so on Sky Burial Island. The Holy Yama didn't mind. What he needed to do now was to break through to the Celestial Palace Honorable Realm on Sky Burial Island. Then he would think of a way to become the young sect master of the demonic sect. This way, even if Wan Er's status wasn't low, he could take it as he wished. Wan Er obviously knew what the Holy Yama was thinking. That was why she wanted to support Duguqiu Mo. The first reason why Wan wanted to support Duguqiu Mo was because Duguqiu Mo had the Demon King descending to the 9th heaven vision. He could cultivate the Demonic Heart Sutra, the core cultivation technique of the demonic sect. The second reason was naturally to support Duguqiu Mo to become the young sect master of the demonic sect. This would make the Holy Yama's plan fail. The Holy Yama glanced at Wan Er. He seemed to have thought of something and said, Wan Er, I heard that you found a martial artist called Duguqiu Mo outside. He has the legendary Demon King descending to the 9th heaven vision. Wan wasn't surprised by the Holy Yama's words. Although he was cultivating in seclusion, many disciples in the sect were loyal to him. Therefore, it was easy for him to find out about Duguqiu Mo, that's right. After the Battle of the Geniuses, Duguqiu Mo will probably join the demonic sect, Wan Er said directly. With Duguqiu Mo's strength and talent, he would definitely be recruited by the demonic extermination sect if nothing unexpected happened. Humph, what if I don't let him walk out of Sky Burial Island, the Holy Yama said coldly. What the Holy Yama wanted was the young sect master of the demonic sect. Duguqiu Mo was clearly a huge threat. He's not as weak as you think. It's not that easy for you to kill him, Wan said coldly. Duguqiu Mo's strength had begun to show in the Holy Emperor world. He was someone who could even fight against Huang Qinqiu. The Holy Yama was as famous as Huang Qinqiu. Therefore, it wouldn't be that easy for him to kill Duguqiu Mo, is that so? Let's wait and see. The Holy Yama smiled coldly. As time passed, the people from the 3 sects and the 4 sword pavilions set off. The 4 overlord families, Dongfang, Nangong, Shimen, and Baiming, were also preparing to set off. Originally, there should be 5 families including the Su family. However, the Su family had been destroyed, so there were only 4 of them left. The geniuses of the 4 overlord families hadn't participated in the Battle of the Holy Emperor world. Therefore, they naturally had to participate in the Battle of Sky Burial Island. Nangong Juyun also set off from the Nangong family. There was a cold look in his eyes. Nangong Juyun didn't only know how to forge. He cultivated both the martial way and craftsmanship way. Yi Guqin, I will take revenge for my failure in forging. Nangong Juyun said coldly in his heart. On the other hand, the Dongfang family, as the leader of the 4 families, had the most extravagant display. A group of young geniuses and family members of the Dongfang family stood on a ship. Their faces were filled with leisurely calmness. Among them, there was a girl in purple. If Yi Guqin was here, he would definitely recognize her. It was Dongfang Ziyun. Chapter 1375. As the leader of the 4 overlord families, the Dongfang family naturally had a strong foundation. The saying, "the sun rises from the east," wasn't just for show. At this moment, Dongfang Ziyun was talking to a handsome young man on the Dongfang family's ship. This young man was dressed in a luxurious golden robe. His face was fair and handsome. What caught people's attention was his eyes. They were also golden, like 2 small suns. He seemed to have walked out of the sun, and his radiance was dazzling. The young people of the Dongfang family seemed to regard him as their leader. The young man with golden eyes was the top genius of the Dongfang family, one of the 10 great young masters, young master Tong Tian, Dongfang Guangyao. It was said that when he was born, there was a sun in his dantian, and he had the physique of light. He was extremely talented. He cultivated and became one of the 10 great young masters, young master Tong Tian. He was also a veteran young master like Chu Xuanjun and Jun Xiaoyao, and not a new young master like Gu Xiaoyang. Ziyun, you said that you met Yi Guqin in that small low-level empire? Dongfang Guangyao asked. That's right. Dongfang Ziyun nodded. Her heart was like a snake, and she was full of schemes. She had persevered from a side branch of the Dongfang family until now, and entered the core circle of the Dongfang family's younger generation. Her cultivation had also improved, and she had reached the 6th level of the Divine Palace. Of course, this was largely because she had clung on to Dongfang Guangyao's thigh. Dongfang Ziyun was extremely scheming. In order to save her own life, she had killed Dongfang Hong without hesitation in the Tianhuang Plains. In the end, she pushed all the blame for his death onto Yi Guqin. It could be said that the reason the Dongfang family and Yi Guqin had a grudge. To a large extent, it was because of Dongfang Ziyun's interference. It was because of her that the Dongfang family and Yi Guqin were at odds with each other. I heard that Yi Guqin also killed people of the Dongfang family. Dongfang Guangyao said indifferently. That's right. Yi Guqin was very decisive and ruthless. He didn't show any mercy. If I wasn't lucky enough to escape, I probably wouldn't have been able to escape death. Dongfang Ziyun's body trembled, and she pretended to be frightened. Ah, it's fine. Since Yi Guqin offended the Dongfang family, I will definitely make him pay the price. He definitely won't survive Burial Sky Island. Dongfang Guangyao didn't care. Then I'll need Brother Guangyao. Dongfang Ziyun smiled, but at the same time, her heart was cold. Yi Guqin was the only person who knew her. Dongfang Hong's was the only one who knew Dongfang Hong. Although the Dongfang family would not believe Yi Guqin's one-sided story, the Dongfang family would not believe him. However, To be on the safe side, Dongfang Ziyun would think of a way to get rid of Yi Guqin in the Burial Sky Island. Oh right, there's also the Baiming family. They've always been at odds with the Dongfang family. Now that we're on Burial Sky Island, we can get rid of them. Dongfang Guangyao smiled. Burial Sky Island was originally the place where the Sky Prides of the South Sky region and the Dark World fought. But now, it had become the place where the major forces schemed against each other. Somewhere in the South Sky region, there was a hidden pavilion. This was one of the strongholds of the Blood Shadow Pavilion. At this moment, 3 figures wearing blood-red robes and blood-red hoods appeared in a blood-red pavilion. Some of the Blood Shadow Pavilion's assassins saw this and couldn't help but exclaim, "Is it finally over? Are these 3 the only ones who survived?" In this blood-red pavilion, there were a total of 300 top-notch Sky Prides of assassins. In the end, only 3 of them walked out alive. It's the thousand-faced Demoness, Blade Armajura, and Killer Boy. As expected, the 3 of them survived until the end. Many of the Blood Shadow Pavilion's assassins exclaimed. The 3 of them could be said to be the strongest Sky Prides in the Blood Shadow Pavilion. They even dared to kill the Sky Prides of the Overlord-level forces. At this moment, a blood-red talisman fell from the sky. One of the 3 people raised his hand and took the talisman. There were only 3 words written on it. Yi Guqin. Hee, it seems like Burial Sky Island won't be too boring this time. A cold voice sounded. With the opening of Burial Sky Island, the entire South Sky region became restless. The 3 sects, 4 pavilions, 5 clans, and even the great dynasties began to make their moves. Meanwhile, in a mysterious place, the endless sea rumbled and surged. What was even more shocking was that this sea actually seemed to extend out of the void. It was vast, and no one knew how deep or far it was. Ordinary people would definitely be shocked by the scene in front of them. However, only some of the older members of the major forces vaguely knew what this place was. Sky Ceiling Sacred Ocean. A mountain, a sea, and a celestial valley. The mountain referred to the Sky Mountain Sword tribe. The celestial valley referred to the Supreme Celestial Valley. The sea referred to the Sky Ceiling Sacred Ocean in front of them, which seemed to have come from the void. At this moment, on the other side of the sea, 4 maidservants in blue dresses were carrying an ice palanquin. The ice palanquin swayed slightly, and the bead curtain flashed vaguely, revealing a corner inside. It was a young girl in a blue silk dress. Her ice blue hair set off her snow-white face. Her eyes were also ice blue, which was magnificent and mysterious. If Yi Guqin was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that this girl was very similar to someone. I heard that the Heaven Weeping Witch from the Dark World will also appear on Burial Sky Island this time. The Heaven Weeping Witch is a disaster and must be killed in the cradle. Perhaps we can join forces with the other emperors and even Di Haotian to kill the Heaven Weeping Witch together. Also, I have a feeling that I will end a karma when I go to Burial Sky Island this time. Then who is the cause and effect on? The young girl with ice blue hair muttered to herself. Almost no one knew that a peerless genius in Sky Ceiling Sacred Ocean had come out of seclusion. The world had another name for her. One of the 4 emperors. The Holy Emperor. In a chaotic place filled with black fog, 2 figures stood there. One of them was a melancholy man in a snow-white robe. He was holding a jade flute horizontally and playing it. Beside him stood a silver-haired girl. The girl was as beautiful as ice. Her long silver hair set off her fair and delicate face. Her eyelashes were curled and long, and her nose and small mouth were all exquisite and pretty. She was like an angel who had fallen to the mortal world. One look at her would make one's heart melt. However, the girl's little face did not have the naive expression of a child. There was only a coldness that kept people thousands of miles away. Qianxue, you might be able to see the brother you have been thinking about day and night, the man in snow-white robe who was playing the flute said with a faint smile. Only then did the girl's little face faintly show a wisp of vitality and light. Brother Yi, the girl murmured.
Chapter 1376. The entire Nantian region was surging with winds and clouds. In the sky, a ship traversed the void. It was the ship of the Sword Dynasty. Yiguchin and the other Sword Sons were listening to Confuzi explain some information about Sky Burial Island. Sky Burial Island is located in the Two-World Mountain. It used to be a forbidden area, Confuzi said. Forbidden area? Yiguchin was a little confused when he heard this. It was the first time he had heard of such a thing. Confuzi continued, there are some secrets of Nantian region that you may not know. In fact, apart from Sky Burial Island, there are 3 forbidden areas in Nantian region. 3 forbidden areas? Not only Yiguchin, but Jian Jinghong and the others were also a little surprised. Because they had never heard of the 3 forbidden areas in Nantian region. But why is there no such news in Nantian region at all? Jian Jinghong asked. Confuzi shook his head slightly and said, it's very simple. Because the 3 forbidden areas are guarded by the 3 hidden forces. Naturally, there is very little news spread out. I see. Yiguchin suddenly understood. He didn't expect that the 3 hidden forces were actually responsible for this. However, Yiguchin vaguely felt that the mountain, sea, and valley seemed to be the supervisors of Nantian region. Confuzi continued, although Sky Burial Island is not a forbidden area now, it used to be. Therefore, there may be various strange creatures of foreign clans in Sky Burial Island. Creatures of foreign clans? Jian Jinghong and the others were confused. Instead, Yiguchin's eyes flashed with a dim light. Could it be? That's right. The creatures of foreign clans refer to the creatures of Dark World, Confuzi said. Dark World? The other Sword Sons were still confused. However, Yiguchin was very clear. Because Dugu's talent of seeking demons came from the soul-devouring clan in Dark World. And there were obviously many clans in Dark World. This soul-devouring clan seemed to be at the top in the Dark World. Therefore, when you are on Burial Sky Island, not only do you have to be wary of the geniuses of the Dark World, but you also have to be careful of the creatures of the Dark World. There may not be any particularly powerful existences among them, but if you encounter them, they will be very difficult to deal with, Confuzi warned. Understood. Jian Jinghong and the others nodded. By the way, your main task is to face the heavenly talents from the Dark World. I guess you don't know much about the Dark World, right? Confuzi asked. Hearing Confuzi's words, the Sword Sons present looked at each other and nodded slightly. Indeed, they had never come into contact with the Dark World. Yiguchin's expression did not change. He had interacted with people from the underworld before. For example, Shui Yiqing and Shui should also be counted. In addition, Dugu Qiuma had also met a genius from the Dark World in the Azura Bloody Road of the Molo dynasty. He was the mysterious number 1 on the blood ranking, Yitsangshan. Presumably, Yitsangshan would also participate this time. The Dark World is independent of the Nantian region. According to legend, it is a world formed by the combination of 7 Saint Emperor small worlds. However, this is only a legend. After all, it is too long ago, Confuzi explained. 7 Saint Emperor small worlds? The Sword Master's words caused everyone to be shocked. They had never expected the Dark World to have such a history. Yiguchin was also a little surprised. After all, he had experienced the Saint Emperor small worlds. The Saint Emperor world was an example. However, he also did not expect the Dark World to be formed by 7 Saint Emperor small worlds. Did that mean that the Dark World was jointly created by 7 Saint Emperors? What was the purpose of the 7 Saint Emperors? Why did the Dark World oppose the Nantian region? Yiguchin realized that the more he knew, the more doubts he had. Confuzi said, actually, you don't need to pay attention to how the Dark World came about. What you need to pay attention to is how powerful the geniuses of the Dark World are. Hearing this, everyone, including Yiguchin, paid full attention and perked up. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will win every battle.
They indeed needed to understand the geniuses of the dark world. Confuzi looked around and said, actually, the dark world is the same as the Nantian region. They also have some rankings for the geniuses. The Nantian region has 1 emperor, 4 kings, 10 young masters, and geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix list. Speaking of this, Confuzi glanced at Yiguchen. Because Yiguchen was a genius who had just become one of the 10 young masters. And the geniuses of the dark world also have a saying, that is, the twin stars of war and calamity, the 4 giants, the 7 overlords, and the 13 guardians. Confuzi's words made Yiguchen and the others look slightly serious. Obviously, these geniuses of the dark world were not easy to deal with. The strength of the 13 guardians is almost equivalent to the geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix list in the Nantian region. The 7 overlords are equivalent to the 10 young masters. The 4 giants are almost equivalent to the 4 kings. As for the twin stars of war and calamity, they are probably comparable to geniuses like Di Haoyan. Confuzi's explanation made the atmosphere slightly silent. It seemed that the geniuses of the dark world were stronger than they had imagined. So remember, on the burial island, the most important thing is to save your own life. The second thing is to get a ranking, Confuzi said earnestly. How do you calculate the ranking on the battlefield of geniuses? Jian Jinghong asked. It's very simple. The Nantian region and the dark world will judge the strength of each other's geniuses. Then they will be divided into ordinary, dangerous, extremely dangerous, and forbidden. Killing geniuses of the dark world of different levels will give you different points. The final score will be calculated and the final ranking on the battlefield of geniuses will be determined. Confuzi's explanation enlightened Yiguchen and the others. This kind of classification was simple and clear. In that case, won't Brother Yi be assigned to the extremely dangerous level by the geniuses of the dark world? Jian Jinghong said with a smile. Master should be able to be assigned to the forbidden level, right? Mu Xingzi said. That's not necessarily true. There are very few geniuses of the Nantian region who can be rated as the forbidden level. Probably only those at the level of Di Haoyan can reach it. But this is good. The higher the position, the easier it is to be targeted by the geniuses of the dark world, Confuzi said. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. He didn't care what kind of level he would be judged by the geniuses of the dark world. But Yiguchen was confident that he could compete with Di Haoyan. A genius who was rated as the extremely dangerous level had a combat strength comparable to the forbidden level. It was exciting just thinking about it. And most importantly, Yiguchen wasn't the only one who had a combat strength comparable to the forbidden level. Even his clone, Duguqiuma, probably had a combat strength comparable to the forbidden level. When 2 forbidden level combatants joined forces, that kind of scene was unimaginable.